Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter has captivated millions across the globe. At first glance, it seems like everything in this universe is carefully thought out down to the smallest detail. But look a little closer and you'll notice that the magical logic starts to crack in some places. Today, we'll dive into some of the most questionable storylines, the ones that raise doubts and leave us wondering. Strap in your broomsticks. It's going to be an interesting ride. Number 1. Wizards and Muggles. Willful ignorance. One of the most baffling traits of the magical world is its near-total disregard for the Muggle world. Wizards have lived alongside non-magical society for centuries, yet they exhibit a shockingly poor understanding of even the most basic everyday things. Take Arthur Weasley, for example. His obsession with plugs is more bewildering than endearing, and yet the magical world is completely surrounded by Muggles. Muggle-borns attend Hogwarts, the Minister for Magic communicates directly with the British Prime Minister, and still there is no integration, no curiosity, just patronizing ignorance. If wizards had taken advantage of even a fraction of Muggle knowledge, perhaps the fight against Voldemort could have been much more effective. Number 2. Dumbledore. Trust he didn't deserve. Albus Dumbledore, the mythic figure, scholar, mentor, champion of justice, and master manipulator. Harry places blind faith in the headmaster from the very start, but this brilliant light repeatedly throws his students into danger. He hires dangerous or incompetent teachers, Quirrell, Lockhart, Umbridge, ignores blatant threats within the school, shifts responsibility onto teenagers, and, most shockingly, deliberately raises Harry as a sacrificial lamb. Can someone who plays with children's lives in the name of the greater good truly be considered a hero? Number 3. Snape's redemption arc, a hero by accident? Severus Snape is one of the saga's most divisive characters. To some, he's a tragic hero. To others, a bitter tormentor. His love for Lily Potter is portrayed as the ultimate act of devotion. But does it really excuse all his sins? Snape humiliated students, terrorized Harry, bullied Neville, and despite his supposed motivations, never once tried to be a kind person. He begged Voldemort to spare Lily with no concern for James or Harry. His final actions feel more like an attempt to soften the reader's judgment than the natural conclusion of a redemptive journey. Number 4. Peter Pettigrew, the rat who outsmarted everyone. Arguably, the strangest plotline revolves around Peter Pettigrew, a questionable marauder, a weak wizard, a cowardly traitor. And suddenly a master of deception, he fakes his death, turns into a rat, and lives undetected for 12 years alongside his enemies. But how did Peter, of all people, manage to fool not only the Weasleys but Dumbledore himself? Why did the Marauder's map show his name, and yet no one noticed? How did he survive among people who could have exposed him at any time? This storyline begins to unravel the more you think about it. Number 5. Wizards and wands. The wand chooses the wizard? Ollivander's words, "The wand chooses the wizard," became iconic. But with each new book, this rule became more flexible, if not entirely meaningless. Harry uses Draco's wand with ease, Ron breaks his and still performs magic, and Neville uses his father's wand until 6th year without losing the ability to cast spells. Sure, the results may be weaker, but the magic still works. In the end, wands can be passed on, stolen, even coerced into allegiance. So where's the line between magical loyalty and just another tool? Number 6. Unforgivable curses and the unpunished amortentia. The 3 unforgivable curses, Imperius, Cruciatus, and Avada Kedavra, guarantee you a one-way ticket to Azkaban. But what exactly sets them apart from something like a love potion, which also removes a person's free will? Amortentia, which can be freely purchased even at Hogwarts, is essentially a form of mind control. Victims become puppets, stripped of autonomy. So why is one form of domination a crime, while the other is just another item on a shop shelf? Where's the logic? Number 7, Voldemort, too foolish to be the ultimate villain. He was meant to be the evil genius of the wizarding world we sees, but somewhere along the way, something went wrong. Voldemort makes one strategic blunder after another. Trusting Snape, always striking at the end of the school year, failing to kill baby Harry despite having every advantage. His actions increasingly feel like plot devices rather than the moves of a brilliant tactician. His obsession with immortality, soul-splitting and prophecy paints him more as a fanatic than a mastermind. No matter how hard Rowling tries to portray Tom Riddle as a demon with brains, by the end he resembles a villain from a pulp novel. Number 8. Obliviating Muggles, all or nothing. In The Half-Blood Prince, Death Eaters destroy the Millennium Bridge. It collapses in broad daylight. Cars fall into the river. Screams echo across London. Chaos in the city, the Muggle News says. And yet there's no mention of mass memory wipes, no sign that the Ministry steps in. The statute of secrecy is supposed to be absolute. But when entire cities witness magic, the response is silence. Do they obliviate hundreds, thousands, or do they just hope no one asks questions? At the Quidditch World Cup in the Goblet of Fire, the dark mark appears in the sky. Camps burn. Muggles are tortured mid-air for all to see. Arthur Weasley says the Ministry's going to have a field day with all this. But what does that mean? Who cleans it up? Who remembers what? The rules feel random. Sometimes one Muggle sees a flying car and gets obliviated. Other times, a whole country watches magical warfare and nothing happens. The secrecy is only enforced when convenient. And for a world that claims to live in hiding, it leaves an awful lot of footprints. Number 9, the Hogwarts grading system. Complete chaos. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, third years face hippogriffs in care of magical creatures. In The Order of the Phoenix, seventh years face thestrals. Both are dangerous. Both can kill. No distinction is made between age groups or safety levels. There's no visible curriculum, no clear progression. Students like Neville are forced into subjects they struggle with for years without help or alternatives. Meanwhile, teachers like Hagrid improvise lessons based on creatures wandering near his hut. There are no textbooks for half the classes. It's not education, it's survival training with a vague schedule. Hermione studies night and day. She breaks down during OWL as McGonagall tells her, use the time turner wisely. But after it all, top marks, sleepless nights. It doesn't matter. She gets a job in the Ministry like it was waiting for her. No interview, no system. Professor Trelawney, who predicts doom every Tuesday, keeps her job for years. No one checks her accuracy. Students are taught theoretical spells in defense against the dark arts while Death Eaters prepare to strike. No combat drills, no emergency training. The real exam comes outside the classroom, and Hogwarts, for all its grandeur, sends them out unprepared. Number 10, family ties no one talks about. Sirius Black watches Bellatrix Lestrange murder his friends, torture Neville's parents, and serve Voldemort with fanatic devotion. Yet not once does he mention that she's his cousin. In The Order of the Phoenix, he yells, "Get away from my godson!" before she kills him. But there's no sign of inner conflict, no emotional weight, no line like, "You were my family once." Nothing. The fact that Sirius and Bellatrix grew up in the same house, under the same roof, learning the same pure blood values and ended up on opposite sides, should matter. But the story treats them like strangers. It goes further. Tonks is Bellatrix's niece. Draco is a distant relative of Harry through the Black family tree. They're all part of the same tangled web of pure blood heritage. But no one acknowledges it. No one hesitates to duel a cousin or curse an uncle. In The Half-Blood Prince, Narcissa Malfoy begs Snape to protect Draco, but never once mentions that her niece, Tonks, is fighting on the other side. It's as if blood ties disappear the moment they become inconvenient to the plot. In a world obsessed with lineage and family pride, these silences are louder than words. Number 11, the Resurrection Stone that barely does anything. Harry turns the Resurrection Stone in his hand. Faces appear, his mother, his father, Sirius, Remus. They speak, but they're not truly there. "We are part of you," says James. They don't touch him. They don't shield him. They can't change what's coming. It's a tender moment, but not a powerful one. This is supposed to be one of the Deathly Hallows, an artifact said to conquer death, but in truth it offers only comfort, not power. No healing, no protection, just shadows of memory. So why did Voldemort want it? He never used it. He didn't even realize the stone was hidden inside the ring he turned into a Horcrux. If he had known, he would have discarded it, because it does nothing. It doesn't bring anyone back. It doesn't make you immortal. It's not even practical in war. Dumbledore calls it a cruel gift. In the end, it's not a weapon, it's grief disguised as magic. And for all the myth around it, the Resurrection Stone feels more like a ghost story than a miracle. Number 12, living portraits and limitless magic. The portraits in Hogwarts are more than decorations. They think, they feel, they remember. They can leave one frame and enter another, whisper secrets between walls, and observe things no one else can. In the Order of the Phoenix, the portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black travels between the headmaster's office and Grimmauld Place. He delivers messages. He eavesdrops. He knows things. You know Phineas Nigellus, that portrait in the office? He's been listening in again, Sirius says, clearly annoyed. Yet no one truly questions how much they know or how powerful they could be. When Dumbledore dies, his portrait appears immediately in the headmaster's office. Not silent, not symbolic. It speaks, it thinks, it gives advice. In the Deathly Hallows, Snape even receives orders from it. You must be the one to kill me, Severus, Dumbledore's portrait tells him. This isn't a ghost. This isn't a memory. This is a magical continuation of Dumbledore himself. And yet, no one interrogates the portrait about what Dumbledore knew. No one turns to it for guidance during the darkest moments. They just let it hang. Why doesn't the Ministry use this magic more often? Why aren't portraits placed in key locations during wartime? They could monitor hallways, identify intruders, track suspects. In The Half-Blood Prince, it's a portrait, Everard, who alerts other paintings across magical institutions that Death Eaters have entered Hogwarts. He's gone to alert the other portraits, McGonagall says. They have an entire spy network hanging on the walls, but instead of using it, the wizarding world lets it gather dust. The truth is, magical portraits could reshape everything: justice, security, intelligence. But like the house elves, they're underestimated, labeled as curiosities instead of assets. Wizards see them as clever illusions, not thinking beings. Number 13, elf magic is stronger than human magic, but no one says a word. Dobby snaps his fingers and he vanishes. Just like that, no wand, no incantation, and he does it inside Hogwarts, something no wizard can do. Dobby has come to save Harry Potter, sir, he cries in the Chamber of Secrets before disappearing with a wounded Harry in his arms. It's not just teleportation. Dobby deflects Lucius Malfoy's attack with a flick of his fingers. A wizard duel stopped cold by a creature everyone treats like a servant. Creature, too, is no ordinary house elf. In the Deathly Hallows, he commands the other elves in the kitchens to fight in the Battle of Hogwarts. They charge into the fray with knives, spells, and pure rage. "Fight! Fight! Fight for my master, defender of house elves!" Creature shouts, and they do. Magic bursts from their hands. No wands, no formal training, just raw power. It's not subtle, it's revolutionary, and still, no one talks about it afterward. Why doesn't the Order of the Phoenix train with them? Why doesn't the Ministry study their magic? House elves break magical laws without breaking a sweat. They can apparate where wizards can't, cast charms without saying a word, and overpower skilled spellcasters. Yet the wizarding world keeps them in kitchens and cellars, washing laundry and polishing armor. It's not just unfair, it's foolish. A society that's losing a war ignores some of its most powerful allies because of centuries-old prejudice. Hermione sees it. She forms SPEW and fights for their rights, but everyone laughs, even Ron, even Harry. "You'll be laughed out of the room," Ron tells her. And maybe that's the problem. Wizards don't want to admit that house elves are capable of things they aren't. So instead of listening, they silence them. Instead of learning, they look away. and in doing so they lose access to a magic older, deeper, and far stronger than their own. Number 14. Slytherin crimes that are completely ignored. Slytherin has always been a house of shadows, a place where ambition often walks hand in hand with cruelty. From the very beginning, it's the house that raised Tom Riddle, better known as Lord Voldemort. Later, it would shelter Draco Malfoy, who opened a secret passage into Hogwarts, allowing Death Eaters to invade the castle. He did this knowingly, putting the lives of every student at risk. Yet after the battle, Draco faced no real punishment. He returned to Hogwarts as if nothing had happened. The school simply moved on. Throughout the series, Slytherins break rules without consequences. In the Order of the Phoenix, Draco, Crabbe and Goyle become members of Umbridge's inquisitorial squad. They abuse their power, bully students, and dock points from anyone who disagrees with them. Fred and George Weasley call it what it is, a dictatorship. "Well, I think we should all just go home now," George said after watching them terrorize classmates. "No one stops them, no teacher intervenes, even Dumbledore turns a blind eye. The pattern is always the same. Slytherins are protected even when they cross the line. Severus Snape, once a Death Eater, becomes head of Slytherin House and a trusted professor. His favoritism is blatant. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, after Draco stages an exaggerated injury to skip a class, Snape praises him. "You're clearly in pain, Draco. Take the day off." Meanwhile, he insults Hermione for knowing answers and bullies Neville relentlessly. The message is clear. In Slytherin, cruelty is tolerated, even rewarded. This double standard erodes any sense of justice at Hogwarts. Students from other houses get punished for much less. Hufflepuffs lose points for being late. Gryffindors are suspended for breaking curfew. But Slytherins hex, lie, cheat, and nothing happens. If Hogwarts is meant to shape the future of the wizarding world, it fails the moment it lets one house live by a different set of rules. Number 15, Umbridge and her dizzying career. Dolores Jane. Umbridge, in her pink cardigan and sickly sweet smile, ascended the ranks of the Ministry of Magic like a parasite clinging to a dying host. Her name evokes shudders among Hogwarts students and disgust among readers. But beneath the surface of her cruelty lies something even more sinister. The question of how such a person, so transparently hateful and mentally unbalanced, could hold power for so long. Her rise was not meteoric in the traditional sense. It was serpentine, cunning, and darkly strategic. She began her career modestly, working her way up the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. According to supplementary materials from J.K. Rowling, she joined the ministry right after leaving Hogwarts, despite having no notable academic achievements or social standing. Her rapid climb in the bureaucratic ladder wasn't due to brilliance or innovation. It was due to her ability to flatter, manipulate, and align herself with power. Even within the conservative halls of the ministry, Umbridge stood out for her zealotry. She championed a harsh, rigid interpretation of law and order, especially when it came to the purity of magical blood. Her disdain for Muggle-borns was not veiled, it was institutionalized. What is truly staggering is how the ministry rewarded her for it. By the time we meet her in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Umbridge holds the title of Senior Undersecretary to the Minister. Cornelius Fudge, drowning in paranoia and desperate to suppress the rising panic about Lord Voldemort's return, sees in Umbridge not just a loyal subordinate, but a tool, and she plays the part perfectly. Her appointment as the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher is not born of merit. It is a political maneuver, a foothold for the ministry inside Hogwarts. Her role quickly mutates. Within weeks, she becomes Hogwarts High Inquisitor with full authority to inspect, evaluate, and ultimately destroy the independence of its professors. She fires Professor Trelawney, humiliates Hagrid, and attempts to sack Dumbledore himself. Her power grows unchecked, not because she is good at her job, but because the system she inhabits is rotten to its core. The ministry fears dissent more than cruelty, incompetence, or injustice. Umbridge thrives in this environment. She doesn't need to be sane, she only needs to be loyal. She introduces the cruel decree that bans all student organizations, clubs, and gatherings without approval. This is not just control, it is surveillance. When she forms the Inquisitorial Squad and arms students like Draco Malfoy with power over their peers, she isn't just governing, she's building a micro-dictatorship. She turns Hogwarts, a place of magic and wonder, into a totalitarian playground. Her use of the blood quill, an illegal magical artifact that etches punishment into students' skin, goes unnoticed, worse, unpunished. "I must not tell lies," Harry is forced to carve into his hand. This is not the act of a misguided educator. It is the act of a sadist who has been emboldened by unchecked authority. And yet, when her reign collapses with the return of Dumbledore and the fall of Fudge, Umbridge does not vanish. She does not flee. She does not face a tribunal. Instead, she resurfaces under the new administration of Rufus Scrimgeour. Though Scrimgeour aims to appear tougher on Voldemort and his Death Eaters, he keeps Umbridge in the Ministry. Her usefulness, it seems, outweighs her crimes. Even as Voldemort's shadow grows, Umbridge retains her position. When the Ministry falls and becomes a puppet regime under the Death Eaters, Umbridge doesn't resist. She thrives. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, we find her presiding over the Muggle-born Registration Commission. She wears the locket of Salazar Slytherin, a Horcrux, and uses it to amplify her already malignant aura. She oversees sham trials where Muggle-born witches and wizards are accused of stealing magic. The image of Umbridge wearing the sign of Voldemort's legacy and passing judgment with a delighted sneer is among the most haunting in the series. She is not coerced. She is not blackmailed. She does this willingly. "I'm sorry, Madam Umbridge, but you have been using a wand not your own." These words, spoken by Harry while disguised under Polyjuice Potion, are a turning point in her story. Yet even this act, using the stolen wand to dominate others, does not end her career. She is merely stunned and left for the authorities to deal with after the fall of Voldemort. And this is where the mystery deepens. Why is she not imprisoned? Why is she not made an example of? The post-war Wizarding Society punishes known Death Eaters, imprisons collaborators, and seeks to reform. But Umbridge, who held public office during a magical holocaust, is not brought to justice. Rowling mentions in interviews that she is eventually imprisoned in Azkaban, but this comes after the book's end and is never detailed in the canon. In the story, she simply vanishes. Her survival reveals a terrifying truth about the wizarding world. The problem is not just that Umbridge exists, it's that the system allows her to exist, encourages her, protects her. She represents the banality of evil wrapped in bureaucracy. Unlike Voldemort, she does not seek immortality or world domination. She wants control. And in a world where fear trumps ethics, control is rewarded. Her story mirrors real-world cases of authoritarian enablers, people who do not kill, but who enable the machinery of cruelty to turn smoothly. She is the paper pusher of darkness, the bureaucrat of oppression. She doesn't need to shout like Bellatrix or murder like Lucius. She destroys with policy, legislation, and smug smiles, and because her crimes are dressed in procedure, they are ignored. Her belief in blood purity is not far from Voldemort's, but she never calls herself a Death Eater. She never brands herself with the dark mark. In many ways, this makes her more dangerous. She is evil that does not name itself evil. She believes herself righteous. When Harry confronts her in the courtroom and sees the locket on her neck, he does not see a villain. He sees a hypocrite cloaked in authority. Number 16, Hogwarts security system. Total absurdity. Hogwarts is often described as one of the most secure locations in the entire wizarding world. Hogwarts is well protected, Professor McGonagall once assured. Dumbledore, too, made it clear to Cornelius Fudge that the only place left that's still safe is Hogwarts. Yet when we look past these confident statements and study what actually occurs within the castle walls over the 7-year timeline of the Harry Potter series, we are left with a baffling contradiction, a troll in the dungeon, A dark wizard hosting Voldemort on the back of his head, a basilisk slithering through the pipes petrifying students, werewolves, Death Eaters, and even Voldemort himself, over and over again managed to bypass every so-called magical protection. This isn't a fortress, it's a trap. In Harry's first year alone, a full-grown mountain troll wanders into the castle on Halloween night. Not only does it manage to get into the dungeons, but it also climbs staircases and enters a girl's bathroom, entirely undetected until it's too late. 11-year-olds are sent to their dormitories with nothing more than advice, no lockdown protocol, no protective spells over the dorms. Instead, 3 first years, including Hermione Granger, are nearly killed. This incident, the first of many, already shatters the illusion that Hogwarts is a safe haven. A troll should never have been able to set foot inside its walls, yet the dangers only escalate. Quirinus Quirrell, the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, is possessed by Voldemort throughout Harry's entire first year. He walks the halls freely, teaches children, hosts magical duels, and nobody, not Dumbledore, not Snape, not McGonagall, senses the Dark Lord's presence literally inches away. This wasn't just a security failure, it was a catastrophic breakdown in magical awareness. The teachers and staff, with their extensive knowledge and experience, were fooled by a stammering professor. The greatest dark wizard in history was camped out under their noses. Then comes the Chamber of Secrets. Not only does a 1,000-year-old basilisk live undisturbed in the bowels of the school, but it is accessed through the girls' bathroom. Again, no spell, enchantment, or protective magic detects the creature or the frequency of student petrifications. Students are terrified, and rather than closing the school immediately, Dumbledore is temporarily removed, while the staff continues to operate under a bizarre normalcy. A message written in blood on the walls isn't enough to warrant evacuation. One has to ask, what exactly are the parameters that demand action? Third year introduces Sirius Black into the narrative. A wanted fugitive, believed to be a mass murderer, not only breaks into the school twice, but even gains entry into the Gryffindor dormitory. How does he do this? With a list of passwords he got from Ron's little rat. Hogwarts' entire security for the common rooms relies on spoken passwords to a portrait, easily bypassed by theft or bribery. Dumbledore knew Black was an animagus. He knew he had a deep connection to Hogwarts and possibly to students. And yet the school employed no enchantments to detect animagi, no protective wards tailored to Black's known abilities. Let us not forget that Sirius also escapes the clutches of the Dementors, the dark creatures that were supposedly guarding every exit. These creatures were trusted with the protection of hundreds of children, despite their known side effects of causing severe depression and psychological trauma. It is questionable at best that Dumbledore allowed them inside the grounds at all. Even with these soul-sucking guardians, Black enters and exits at will. Hogwarts is beginning to resemble a revolving door more than a fortress. Fourth year descends into farce. The Triwizard Tournament is revived, a competition so dangerous it had been banned for centuries. Dumbledore agrees to reinstate it, believing that stronger safety measures will prevent death. Yet Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody using Polyjuice Potion, manipulates the tournament from the inside. He bewitches the Goblet of Fire. He sneaks forbidden items onto the school grounds. He literally turns a Triwizard Cup into a portkey leading directly to Voldemort. The result? A student, Cedric Diggory, is murdered, and Harry is nearly killed. The imposter had been at Hogwarts for an entire school year, conducting illegal activities under the very nose of Dumbledore. A Polyjuice disguise fools every adult. The question is simple. What happened to all the magical protections? In fifth year, the Ministry appoints Dolores Umbridge as High Inquisitor. Although her reign brings a new flavour of terror, what's even more disturbing is the complete lack of magical response to her cruelty. Hogwarts, sentient in its own way and deeply bound to Dumbledore, allows Umbridge to torture students, use blood quills, and form an authoritarian regime. Is there no magic embedded in the school to prevent abuse? Centuries of history, and not a single protective spell stops a teacher from causing physical harm to her pupils? Even the room of requirement, a secret space known only to a select few, has to be discovered by the students themselves to escape her tyranny. Sixth year brings the darkest irony. Draco Malfoy, a student with no real experience in complex magic, manages to smuggle Death Eaters into the school through a vanishing cabinet. A literal gateway is built between Hogwarts and Borgin and Berks, and no one notices, not Filch, not Snape, not even Dumbledore. There is no enchantment on the school to detect unauthorized magical travel, apparently. The Death Eaters storm the Astronomy Tower. They engage in battle with the Order of the Phoenix, destroy property, injure students, and Dumbledore is murdered. This is perhaps the most shocking failure of all. If Hogwarts can't even protect its headmaster, how can it possibly protect its children? And then comes the final year. Though Harry does not attend, Hogwarts becomes a fascist training ground under the Carrows, siblings and Death Eaters, who use torture as education. Students are forced to practice the Cruciatus Curse on each other. Resistance is punished brutally. Once more, we must ask, is Hogwarts alive? If so, why does it not rebel against such desecration? Why do centuries of protective spells woven into the very stonework of the castle fall silent in the face of open evil? Number 17, Hermione, a super genius who misses the obvious. It begins with a contradiction. A girl enters the wizarding world not by legacy nor by luck, but by sheer force of brilliance. Hermione Jean Granger, Muggle-born, determined, and dazzlingly intelligent, sets foot in Hogwarts and rewrites what it means to be a first-year student. She doesn't merely study spells, she masters them. She doesn't just read books, she devours them, remembers every fact, and quotes obscure magical laws with the confidence of a senior aura. And yet throughout the Harry Potter series, her intellect is selectively dimmed by the narrative, her logic turned on and off like a switch to serve the plot. The first real fracture in her characterization appears in The Prisoner of Azkaban. By this point, Hermione has established herself as a walking encyclopedia, someone who fact-checks her professors and treats the Hogwarts library like a second home. And yet, when presented with a magical item of immense significance, the Marauder's map, she never once questions the identity of Peter Pettigrew. The map, enchanted to reveal every person within Hogwarts, shows a name that should have raised every alarm bell in her mind. "There's one name I just don't understand," Harry says. "Peter Pettigrew?" That name should have sparked curiosity, especially in Hermione, who had just spent hours researching time turners, studying boggarts, and understanding hippogriff trials. A boy supposedly dead for 12 years is walking around the castle, and she doesn't investigate? Hermione's failure to press the issue here is staggering. She knows how magic works. She knows the map is no ordinary trick. She also knows, or should suspect, that someone might be using polyjuice potion or disguise spells. But instead of logically dissecting the mystery, she accepts it with the same passivity one might show toward an odd rain cloud. For someone who deduced Lupin's condition as a werewolf from nothing more than a book and a timetable, missing the Pettigrew clue feels like a narrative betrayal. Even more troubling is the complete lack of suspicion toward Ron's rat, Scabbers. After all, this is a magical world. Creatures live far longer than normal, but even so, a common rat that's been with the family for over a decade? That fact alone should have made Hermione raise an eyebrow. She is aware of magical anomalies and enchantments. She once suspected a cat of being a disguised animagus, Sirius Black no less, but didn't blink twice when Scabbers' profile stopped matching any known rat behavior. When Crookshanks, a cat with impeccable instincts, repeatedly targets Scabbers, Hermione's only reaction is emotional defensiveness, not intellectual curiosity. She prioritizes her feelings over facts, a sharp contrast to the Hermione who once lectured Harry about not letting emotions cloud reason. Her selective blindness resurfaces with perhaps her most obvious oversight, Draco Malfoy's sixth-year behavior. In The Half-Blood Prince, Malfoy is pale, drawn, secretive, and increasingly absent from class. He's using the room of requirement dabbling in occlumency and behaving in ways that scream covert operation. Even Harry, often less deductive than his friend, sees it, but Hermione dismisses it all as paranoia. The same Hermione who once brewed Polyjuice Potion to sneak into Slytherin house now refuses to acknowledge the growing evidence against Draco. She refuses to entertain the idea that Malfoy could be involved in something serious. Not because she has evidence to the contrary, but because the plot demands she be skeptical. It's jarring because we have seen what she's capable of. In Chamber of Secrets, she deduces that the monster is a basilisk based on cryptic clues and her deep knowledge of magical creatures. She figures this out while petrified, clutching a torn page in her stiff hand, a brilliant stroke of logic under pressure. But come 6th year, she's somehow unable to connect basic dots about a classmate acting like he's joined a cult. She knows about secret passageways, she knows about the Room of Requirement. She should, by all accounts, be helping Harry investigate, not belittling his instincts. Perhaps the most baffling lapse comes with Dolores Umbridge. Hermione, of all people, should immediately recognize Umbridge as a threat, a ministry official wielding unchecked authority, implementing surveillance, banning free expression, and punishing dissent, all red flags to a girl who values justice, learning, and order. Yet it takes weeks of abuse, detentions, and tyranny before Hermione fully grasps the scope of Umbridge's danger. Even then, her plan to get rid of her, luring her to the Forbidden Forest with the promise of a weapon, is riddled with reckless assumptions. For a girl known for contingency plans, for her aversion to rule-breaking, her behavior is wildly out of character. She's clever, yes, but here she acts impulsively, relying on centaurs to remove a government official. The inconsistency becomes more glaring when you consider that Hermione knew, from Goblet of Fire onward, that the Ministry was deeply flawed. She watched as they discredited Harry and Dumbledore, refused to acknowledge Voldemort's return, and then installed Umbridge as a puppet. And yet, in Order of the Phoenix, she is still slow to question authority figures. Why? This is the same girl who founded SPEW, who challenged institutional norms and who risked punishment to protect what she believed in. Suddenly she's naive about politics. Even her treatment of magical creatures defies logic at times. In Prisoner of Azkaban, she launches into a crusade for house elf rights, yet fails to listen to the elves themselves. She knits hats and socks, hides them around Gryffindor Tower, and assumes that the elves want what she wants. When they reject her gifts, she's offended. It doesn't occur to her that liberation is not a one-size-fits-all solution. This isn't just immaturity, it's a lapse in logic. A true advocate listens, observes, and adapts. Hermione does none of these things. She operates under the assumption that knowledge equals understanding, which it doesn't. Number 18, Animagy, a mystery wrapped in secrecy. In the vast and layered world of Harry Potter, few magical disciplines are as awe-inspiring as Animagus transformation, the ability to morph into an animal at will. It is an arcane and dangerous form of magic, one that requires intense study, precision, and most crucially, official registration with the Ministry of Magic. Animagi are supposed to be rare. Their identities are recorded to prevent the misuse of such a power. After all, an unregistered animagus could, quite literally, vanish from human oversight. According to The Prisoner of Azkaban, there were only 7 registered animagi in the entire 20th century. This fact makes what follows all the more bewildering. 3 schoolboys, Sirius Black, James Potter, and Peter Pettigrew, somehow managed to master this form of magic in secret while still attending Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. They were teenagers, unqualified, and unsupervised. And yet, without alerting the Ministry or even many of their teachers, they became a dog, a stag, and a rat. How, in a supposedly tightly regulated magical society, did such a feat go unnoticed? And more curiously, why is animagus magic so conspicuously underused by the adult wizarding population? These boys did not undertake the transformation for noble purposes. They did it out of loyalty to a friend, Remus Lupin, who, as a werewolf, was condemned to solitude each full moon. To accompany him during his transformations, his friends decided to become animals themselves. It was an act of compassion, certainly, but also reckless. The process, as outlined in supplementary materials like the Animagus Registry Guide, involves dangerous steps, holding a mandrake leaf in the mouth for an entire month, performing complicated spells at the right lunar phase, drinking a concoction infused with one's own hair, and confronting one's deepest magical self. The odds of this going wrong are high, deadly even, and yet Sirius, James, and Peter succeeded. No official instructor, no ministry oversight, no consequences. This raises a jarring question. If these three students could accomplish it, why is the adult magical world so seemingly incapable or disinterested? Alastor Moody, for instance, a legendary aura, never once considered Animagus transformation as a tool in his considerable arsenal. Even during the First and Second Wizarding Wars, when stealth and deception were paramount, no mention is made of animagi working in espionage for the Ministry or the Order of the Phoenix. This absence is glaring. There is also the peculiar case of Rita Skeeter, the unscrupulous journalist who became an unregistered beetle to spy on conversations. Unlike the Marauders, she wasn't a student when she did it. She was a professional journalist. And yet, despite being unregistered and violating magical law, she was never officially punished. Hermione Granger blackmailed her into silence rather than reporting her to the authorities. Why didn't the Ministry have any way to track or detect her? If Animagus transformations are such a serious security threat, surely there should be mechanisms in place to identify or restrict them. Sirius Black himself, once falsely imprisoned in Azkaban, managed to escape by turning into his Animagus form, a large black dog. The Dementors, supposedly impossible to deceive or escape, failed to sense his altered presence. This suggests a catastrophic blind spot in wizarding law enforcement. One of the most high-profile prisoners escaped simply by exploiting an ability learned as a teenager. If Animagus transformation can outwit the darkest security measures in the wizarding world, why hasn't more effort been made to understand, control, or replicate it? Furthermore, if the transformation is as difficult as it is said to be, it begs the question, how did Peter Pettigrew, arguably the least talented of the trio, succeed? He is portrayed throughout the series as cowardly, weak, and magically average. And yet he not only became an Animagus, but maintained that form undetected for over a decade. He lived as a rat in the Weasley household, attending Hogwarts again as Scabbers. No teacher, not even Albus Dumbledore, sensed anything odd. How can such an advanced magical disguise escape the notice of so many seasoned wizards? The Hogwarts staff, for all their intelligence and magical expertise, also appeared oblivious. Minerva McGonagall herself is a registered Animagus. She transforms into a tabby cat with spectacle-like markings, one of the first magical acts we see in the series. She, of all people, would be expected to notice the telltale signs of an Animagus form. And yet, she never suspected Peter Pettigrew, despite his proximity to the school, and never suspected that Sirius Black's Animagus form was sneaking into Hogwarts. It's a narrative gap that feels more like a crack. Dumbledore, the all-seeing headmaster, knew that Sirius, James, and Peter were close to Remus Lupin. He also knew Remus was a werewolf, a fact he kept secret from the school. Yet the knowledge that these boys were wandering around the school grounds during full moons, illegally transforming into animals, somehow never reached him. Or if it did, he never acted on it. Was this an oversight, or a deliberate blind eye? The books never answer. The Marauders' map adds another layer of implausibility. Created by the same group of students, this magical document can track every person at Hogwarts in real time, including their Animagus forms. It names Peter Pettigrew, even when he is in rat form. If students could create such an incredible tool, why hasn't the Ministry replicated it? A map like this would be invaluable to auras, especially during wartime, and yet no mention is ever made of a similar artifact being used by magical law enforcement. The entire concept of registration also begins to feel hollow. What is the purpose of registering animagi if there is no effective enforcement? Skeeter never registered. Pettigrew never registered. The Marauders never registered. And all of them used their forms for deceptive and, in some cases, criminal purposes. There is no known spell or magical detector that can identify an animagus. That in itself is terrifying. A person could literally hide in plain sight, right under the eyes of the ministry. And where are the adult animagi in the broader magical world? We meet Minerva McGonagall and Rita Skeeter, and that's essentially it. No auras are ever mentioned as having this skill. No spies, no battle strategists, no scouts. In a world that includes Polyjuice Potion, invisibility cloaks, and disillusionment charms, animagus transformation should be a game-changer. You can fly, fight, or flee while bypassing most traditional magical detection, and yet it is ignored. Even more baffling is how this transformation is never formally taught at Hogwarts. If 3 students could learn it independently, with all the risks involved, why not include it in the curriculum under careful guidance? At the very least, advanced students could be offered the option. The lack of institutional teaching or even discussion of animagus transformation feels like a deliberate narrative hole. This is not a minor inconsistency. It impacts the logic of magical surveillance, law enforcement, and even the structure of magical society. If animagus transformation is simultaneously so powerful, so dangerous, and so rare, it demands far more explanation. Instead, we are left with a world where 3 schoolboys defy the rules with impunity, while adult institutions remain oddly blind and inert. The Order of the Phoenix, tasked with resisting Voldemort and his Death Eaters, never once deploys an animagus for intelligence gathering. Mundungus Fletcher disguises himself using Polyjuice Potion or magical cloaks. But why not an animagus? During the scene where Harry is moved from Privet Drive under the cover of identical disguises, no animagus is involved. Again, the magical world behaves as if this power doesn't exist. There's also the issue of magical detection spells. If animagi are invisible to them, as Sirius and Peter seem to have been, then the wizarding world has a gaping vulnerability. The Ministry of Magic, obsessed with control and order, would surely have developed countermeasures. Yet none are mentioned. It's as though animagus transformation exists in a narrative vacuum, immune to the rules that govern every other magical discipline. Harry himself never considers becoming an animagus, not even after learning about his father's form. It would seem like a natural progression, especially since he inherits his father's magical prowess. And yet the idea is never explored, nor do Hermione or Ron, both of whom are resourceful and brave. After all, if Peter Pettigrew could do it, Hermione surely could. The books offer no explanation. The contrast between the supposed difficulty of the magic and the ease with which students accomplished it creates a fundamental tension in the narrative. Either the transformation is incredibly hard, and thus the Marauders were geniuses, or it's more accessible than the books suggest, in which case its underutilization is baffling. Neither option is fully satisfying. In the end, animagus transformation stands as one of the most enigmatic and inconsistent magical elements in the Harry Potter universe. It is either a brilliant loophole that 3 boys exploited, or a gaping flaw in magical law enforcement that no adult seems to care about. Either way, it challenges the internal logic of J.K. Rowling's otherwise intricate world. The story of the Marauders is beloved by fans, filled with mischief, loyalty, and tragedy. But when scrutinized, their animagus abilities raise more questions than answers. How could they master a forbidden art in secret? Why were they never caught? Why did no adult wizard ever think to do the same? And perhaps most disconcerting of all, if animagus transformation can be hidden so easily, how many other secrets walk unnoticed through the wizarding world? Number 19, becoming a Horcrux, a beginner's manual. Of all the secrets that haunt the shadows of the wizarding world, none is darker or more horrifying than the act of creating a Horcrux. And yet, for such a grotesque manipulation of life and death, its process is shrouded in mystery so complete that it borders on narrative absurdity. The reader is told again and again that this form of dark magic is the ultimate taboo, feared and reviled, but almost nothing is said about the mechanics behind it. How exactly does one split the soul? What are the precise steps? The books seem content to whisper of it, then change the subject. This might have sufficed had Tom Riddle not mastered it with such disturbing ease while still a teenager at Hogwarts. Tom Marvolo Riddle was no ordinary student, but even his exceptional intelligence cannot explain how a mere schoolboy unearthed the darkest magical secret in existence. By the time he graduated, he had already created at least one Horcrux, his diary. Dumbledore later suspects that the murder of Moaning Myrtle was the soul-rending act that birthed it. This places the creation of the diary sometime in Riddle's 5th year. 5th year, 15 years old. And yet he had access to spell that many adult wizards refused to speak aloud. Few who know anything about Horcruxes are prepared to speak of them, says Dumbledore gravely in Half-Blood Prince. But somehow Tom found the words, the rituals, and the understanding. How? Dumbledore tells Harry that Riddle must have found instructions in the Room of Requirement, in a book hidden even from the restricted section of the Hogwarts library. This is an astonishing revelation if the process of creating a Horcrux is so vile that even Ministry officials recoil at the idea. Why does the book exist at all? And if it does exist, why is it sitting alone and unguarded in a hidden cabinet accessible to any student clever enough to want to cheat on an exam? The Room of Requirement is magical, yes, but it is also public. Fred and George Weasley used it to hide fireworks, Dobby used it to store socks, and Tom Riddle used it to uncover the secret to immortality. It feels like placing the recipe for a nuclear bomb in the Lost and Found. The only printed explanation we ever see comes from a brief passage in Secrets of the Darkest Art, a book Hermione finds in the Hogwarts library during the Horcrux hunt. But this book is not locked in the Department of Mysteries. It's not kept in a vault under Gringotts. It's in the school library. In the restricted section, yes, but as we all know, a simple signed note from a professor is enough to access that shelf. Even first year Harry managed to get in. And when Hermione gets her hands on the book, she discovers that it describes not just what a Horcrux is, but the act of murder needed to create one. The ripping apart of the soul, the book says, is accomplished by an act of supreme evil, the murder. Killing rips the soul apart. That such a book is not destroyed outright is a staggering oversight. This leads us to question the competence, or perhaps the will, of those who govern magical knowledge. Why hasn't the Ministry obliterated every known copy of this text? It clearly exists in multiple copies, given how easily Hermione found one. Is it not more dangerous than a basilisk hidden in the plumbing or a cursed opal necklace in a display case? The wizarding world has strict laws about time-turners, flying carpets, and even certain love potions, but a guidebook to soul mutilation is left sitting on a dusty shelf. There is no sense of proportion here. This is magic that requires murder as its ignition spark, and yet it is treated with the bureaucratic indifference of expired cauldron regulations. Tom Riddle's diary, the first of his Horcruxes, is perhaps the most puzzling of all. Not because it exists, but because of what it can do. It doesn't merely hide a sliver of soul. It thinks, it manipulates, it possesses, it controls Ginny Weasley, a girl too young to know how to resist. The diary is practically a person. And here we must ask, is this typical of Horcruxes? If not, then what made the diary so powerful? Was it the nature of the murder that birthed it? Myrtle's death was cruel, but accidental in its method. Riddle unleashed the basilisk, but didn't kill her with his own wand. Was that enough? If yes, then the rules for Horcruxes are staggeringly flexible. If not, then the diary is a one-off, an exception that renders the whole logic fragile. Let us look at another Horcrux, the locket of Salazar Slytherin. When Harry and Dumbledore retrieve the fake locket from the cave, Dumbledore warns that the protections surrounding it are not just clever, they are designed to torment. And yet, when Harry and the others finally do destroy the real locket, they are treated to another mystery. The Horcrux fights back. It shows them images, it whispers, it tries to survive. If a Horcrux contains only a soul fragment, how does it project illusions? How does it know what to say to stab at Ron Weasley's deepest fears? This is not just an echo of Voldemort's mind. This is sentience, malice, fear. These are not traits of inert magical objects. These are the instincts of something that wants to live. And that brings us to the question that truly shatters the logic. If Horcruxes are so powerful, so dangerous, so nearly invincible, then why is there not a single, comprehensive explanation of how they function? Dumbledore, the most brilliant wizard of his age, speculates about their nature more than he explains it. The soul is supposed to remain intact and whole, he says. Splitting it is an act of violation. But this is philosophy, not instruction. And in a story that hinges so heavily on the destruction of these items, the lack of detail feels less like mystery and more like evasion. Consider this: even the killing curse, Avada Kedavra, is taught in the classroom. Mad-Eye Moody, really Barty Crouch Jr., demonstrates it in front of a fourth-year class. Unforgivable, yes, but not unspeakable. And yet Horcruxes remain whispers in the dark, even as they shape the core of the final 3 books. When Harry asks Slughorn about them, the potions master nearly has a stroke. "You must understand," he gasps, "this is forbidden knowledge." But forbidden to whom? The students who casually discuss Dementors over pumpkin juice? The Aurors who battle dark wizards for a living? No, this knowledge is forbidden in name only, since Riddle, a child, found it and mastered it. Let's not forget that Horcruxes are supposed to be permanent. They are designed to anchor the soul of the Creator to the mortal world, and yet the soul fragments in them are shown to feel pain, to scream, to suffer as they are destroyed. When the ring is shattered, Dumbledore is cursed. When the cup is pierced by a basilisk fang, it emits a wail. These are not merely magical detonations, they are the reactions of living things. So how does one control that? What keeps a Horcrux stable? What if a soul fragment escapes on its own? Could it inhabit another being like a ghost? Could it grow? Voldemort's survival post-1981 suggests it can, but no one ever explains how. There is a moment in Half-Blood Prince when Harry, stunned by what he has learned, wonders aloud how many Horcruxes Voldemort might have made. Dumbledore's guess is 7, the number Voldemort considered the most magically powerful. But this guess turns out to be correct, meaning that even Dumbledore with no confirmed knowledge somehow got the answer right. That's not cleverness, that's coincidence masquerading as plot logic. For a storyline so crucial to the final confrontation, it is troubling that it relies so heavily on guesses and suppositions, and still the most absurd part is this: the book that explains Horcrux creation remains intact. At no point does the Ministry seize it, at no point does McGonagall, once headmistress, order it burned. Hermione, who made it her mission to erase dangerous knowledge from public hands, recall her crusade against Rita Skeeter, says nothing about destroying secrets of the darkest art. She simply puts it back. A manual on soul mutilation, stored like a used textbook ready for the next Tom Riddle to find. The idea that the wizarding world would allow this is more fantastical than any magic in the series. Even more baffling is that there is no magical alarm, no enchantment, no portrait in Hogwarts that detects the creation of a Horcrux on school grounds. Riddle kills Myrtle, hides the diary, and walks away with part of his soul sealed into a book. Hogwarts, the most magical building in Britain, remains silent. The Marauder's map can see people in their animagus forms. The castle can move staircases and seal off hallways. But it cannot sense the splitting of a soul. Either the castle is blind, or the act is so subtle it leaves no trace. Either explanation is terrifying. We are left, then, with the image of a boy, clever, handsome, polite, walking the ancient halls of a magical school with the instructions for immortality tucked under his arm. He charms the staff, manipulates his peers, and builds a private empire of horror in the silence between classes. And no one notices the boy who would become Voldemort commits his first murder in a bathroom and is rewarded with power no adult dares speak of. The system that should have stopped him, the teachers, the ministry, the magical safeguards, fails entirely. Even after his fall, the Horcruxes remain hidden, not because they are well guarded, but because no one knows where to look. The ring sits in the ruins of the Gaunt Shack. The locket rests in a seaside cave protected by inferi. The diadem is literally inside Hogwarts in a room used by generations of students. None of them are in Gringotts or Azkaban or some secret ministry vault. They are in places known to Riddle's memory, and still no one found them because no one knew to look. In the end, the logic collapses under the weight of its own silence. We are told Horcruxes are the darkest of the dark, and yet they are easy to make, easy to find knowledge of, and seemingly impossible to fully understand. Tom Riddle turned himself into a ghost that couldn't die, using steps that are barely sketched out for the reader. The spell is hidden, the ritual vague, the consequences contradictory. It is a plot device dressed as ancient magic. And the more one looks at it, the more it feels like a shortcut for evil rather than a true system of rules. The greatest irony is that Voldemort himself does not seem to understand the magic he mastered. His soul, when shown to Harry in King's Cross, is a ruined thing, shredded, screaming, pathetic. He sought immortality but built himself a prison. And in the end, it is not the complexity of the Horcruxes that defeats him, but the human traits he never understood: loyalty, love, sacrifice. But the unanswered questions remain. How did a schoolboy gain access to forbidden arts that not even Death Eaters dare speak of? Why was that knowledge available in a school library? And why, after all the pain they caused, do Horcruxes remain the least explained major plotline in the entire saga? For a world so rich with detail and lore, the Horcrux subplot stands apart as both essential and undercooked. It is a mystery not because it is meant to be one, but because it cannot withstand the light. The instructions are there, but they are written in disappearing ink. Number 20, Harry's Forgotten Blood Protection. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore speaks of a protection that seems to transcend even his immense magical abilities, a magic more ancient than spells, older than wands and more powerful than any known enchantment. While you can still call it home, he tells Harry, there he cannot touch you. He shed your blood, but your mother sealed you with hers. It is a stirring explanation, an emotional tether to Lily Potter's sacrifice, woven not only into Harry's skin but into the very walls of Number 4, Privet Drive. And yet for all its gravitas and the narrative weight it carries, this blood magic, this supposedly impenetrable defense, vanishes from the plot as though it had never mattered at all. From the moment it is introduced, the logic behind this protection invites awe. Lily's death creates a magical bond, one that Dumbledore preserves by placing Harry with Petunia, her sister. This act, he claims, seals the magic of Lily's sacrifice until Harry comes of age, so long as he can call the Dursleys' house his home. But that condition becomes suspiciously flexible. In The Half-Blood Prince, Harry spends mere minutes at Privet Drive, then departs with Dumbledore. He never sleeps another night under that roof. No fanfare, no protective ritual, no final words about the dissolving of the blood magic. It simply ends and no one cares. The most powerful defensive spell in the entire wizarding world is treated like an expired parking meter. By Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the whole concept has evaporated into narrative mist. Harry is no longer protected, and the story does nothing to mourn or even acknowledge the loss of that shield. When the Order evacuates him from Privet Drive, the operation focuses entirely on confusion and misdirection. 7 Harry Potters in the sky, disillusionment charms, broomsticks flying in formation. But where is the ancient protection now? Has it quietly faded, or, worse, has Rowling forgotten it? Dumbledore's once majestic spell, woven through blood and love, is never mentioned again. This is not just a narrative oversight, it is a logical fracture. Voldemort is no stranger to magic, both ancient and forbidden. If blood protection was such a formidable obstacle that it repelled even his killing curse as an infant, wouldn't he obsess over it? Wouldn't he, in his meticulous study of magical loopholes, have sought to corrupt it, break it, or reverse engineer it for his own use? But we hear nothing of the sort. Voldemort makes no mention of Harry's blood-based sanctuary after the 5th book, despite his growing obsession with defeating death and destroying Harry completely. And then there is the matter of the blood itself. In Goblet of Fire, Voldemort chooses to use Harry's blood in his resurrection ritual. "He is in my power," Voldemort gloats. "The protection his mother left in his blood, I take it now for my own." It is a chilling scene. The idea that Voldemort believes he has absorbed Lily's protection, wrested it from Harry, fused it into his own being, is deeply disturbing. But this, too, is forgotten. Later, Dumbledore tells Harry that this decision actually backfires on Voldemort. The piece of soul inside Harry is preserved only because Voldemort used Harry's blood. And still, even this revelation is brushed aside in favor of Horcruxes and Hallows. No one ever tries to amplify or replicate the blood protection. Not Dumbledore, not McGonagall, not even the fiercely protective Molly Weasley. If this is the purest form of love-based magic, strong enough to render the boy who lived invincible in infancy, why not seek out other ways to sustain it? Couldn't Lily's magical lineage, or Petunia's, or even Harry's own blood, be used to renew the shield? No effort is made. It is as if this once hallowed magic had served its purpose and been discarded. Consider, too, the psychological impact this oversight should have had on Harry. In Order of the Phoenix, the boy is consumed by his connection to Voldemort, terrified of becoming a weapon. The blood protection, while unseen, is a comfort, an assurance that despite the chaos around him, some part of his mother's love still lives. When this defense vanishes without explanation, Harry should feel exposed, vulnerable, yet we never see him wrestle with this. The boy who often questions everything, even Dumbledore's choices, never asks, "What happened to the blood magic?" It is moments like this where the narrative loses its grip on internal coherence. The rules of Rowling's world are often flexible, but not without cost. To introduce a magical law so foundational and emotional, then silently withdraw it, is to betray the trust of the reader. Readers expect magic to have rules, consequences, and continuity. When Voldemort shatters the protection by taking Harry's blood, the story sets up a complex duality. Voldemort now holds part of Lily's love, but he also strengthens Harry's resilience. That tension should drive the rest of the plot. But it is never mentioned again. Instead, new magical principles are introduced to take its place. The Elder Wand, the power of sacrificial death in the Forbidden Forest, the Hallows. Each new magical system enters the story with its own logic and replaces the last, like a magician pulling rabbits from increasingly dusty hats. But the blood protection was more than a trick. It was a promise, a mother's sacrifice, a binding magic, a hidden fortress. To forget it is to forget the very soul of the story. What makes this oversight even more egregious is how much Dumbledore emphasizes it. "You are protected, in short, by your ability to love," he tells Harry. The Dark Lord cannot understand this kind of power. And yet he never again advises Harry to preserve or strengthen that love-based shield. He never asks Harry to return to Privet Drive, even briefly to recharge the magic. The only explanation is narrative convenience. Rowling needed Harry to be free of the Dursleys, and so the spell, this marvel of magical architecture, was quietly retired. In The Half-Blood Prince, when Harry visits the Burrow for the summer, no one comments on the fact that he has broken the one magical contract that kept him safe. Dumbledore picks him up with no mention of the protection ending. There is no ritual, no moment of farewell to the only defense that ever truly worked. It simply vanishes, like the memory of a dream. This is where the plot begins to bend under the weight of its own inconsistencies. The magical world of Harry Potter is built on symbolism. Wands choose the wizard. Death is not the end. Love is the greatest power. And blood, the ancient medium of both love and sacrifice, is the key to it all. "Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken," chants Voldemort, because blood carries power. If this is true, then Harry's blood is more than just a relic of his mother. It is the conduit through which her protection flows. The fact that no one seeks to exploit, reinforce, or even understand this power makes no sense. Imagine if someone had. Imagine if Dumbledore had used Lily's blood to enchant Grimmauld Place, or if Snape had used Petunia's ancestry to concoct a protective potion. These are wizards capable of splitting souls and altering time, yet not one of them thinks to study the blood that once repelled death itself. It is a narrative sin of omission, a story that forgets its own heartbeat. Even within the broader magical community, the implications are staggering. If a simple act of sacrificial love can create such a shield, why is it not standard magical practice? Why isn't it taught at Hogwarts or recorded in the Department of Mysteries? Dumbledore claims this magic is ancient and rare, but that only adds to its value, and yet it remains a footnote, spoken once and never again. By the final book, when Harry walks willingly into death, the story revisits the theme of self-sacrifice, but only in a new form. Harry becomes the Christ figure, laying down his life to destroy the soul inside him. And this act protects his friends, much like Lily's protected him. But the story makes no connection between these two moments. No one says, "Your mother did this first." No one points out that the power of blood has come full circle. Thematically, it should have been a beautiful parallel. Instead, it is a missed opportunity. Readers are left with questions. Did Voldemort's use of Harry's blood create a new form of protection? Did it alter his own soul? Did Dumbledore know this would happen? None of these questions are ever truly answered. The blood, like so many threads in the tapestry of Rowling's world, is left to unravel. And so we are left to wonder, was it all just a plot device? A magical rule invented to justify Harry's survival, then quietly abandoned when it became inconvenient? The evidence suggests yes. The blood magic never develops. It never evolves. It never returns. It is a single-use spell in a world where magic, once cast, always echoes. This is the tragedy of the forgotten blood. Not that it failed, but that it was never given the chance to thrive. In a series that prides itself on connections, meanings, and circles completed, the blood protection stands as the one sacred bond that is never closed. Number 21, Muggleborns and their sudden magic. In the heart of the wizarding world, where portraits talk, staircases shift, and spells weave reality into marvel, one of the greatest mysteries lies not within a hidden chamber or a cursed object, but in the bloodlines themselves. Among purebloods, half-bloods, and squibs, there exists a category that defies all logic, a thread that remains untouched by reason or magical science. The Muggle-born witches and wizards. Hermione Granger, arguably the brightest witch of her generation, emerged from a family of dentists. Lily Evans, mother of the boy who lived, grew up in a perfectly ordinary Muggle home with no magical history. Their stories are celebrated, their power respected, but the origin of their magic remains a silent question that no character, no book, and no institution dares to answer. The books detail with almost obsessive interest the idea of blood purity. Characters like Draco Malfoy proudly claim their pure blood status. Families such as the Blacks keep elaborate family trees tracing magical lineage. The Ministry of Magic even has an official registry of known pure blood families, and yet despite this societal fixation, no wizard seems remotely curious about how someone like Hermione, born of two Muggles, can possess magical abilities powerful enough to rival and even surpass most purebloods. This contradiction is jarring. If bloodline is everything to them, why are they not fascinated, alarmed even, by these so-called anomalies? Dumbledore, often seen as the wisest wizard of his age, never once offers an explanation for Muggle-born magic. He celebrates it, he defends it, but he does not dissect it. And while he certainly may have had deeper thoughts on the matter, the narrative never shares them. It matters not what someone is born, but what they grow to be, he tells us. A noble sentiment, yes, but it skirts the deeper scientific and magical implications. In a society with magical departments for the regulation of magical creatures, misuse of Muggle artifacts, and even time travel, there is shockingly little intellectual investment in understanding the emergence of magic in people whose ancestors were supposedly entirely non-magical. The tale of Lily Evans is particularly poignant. She was discovered by Professor Slughorn, a man obsessed with talent, legacy, and family trees. And yet his only interest in Lily was her charm, her potential, and her looks. He never once questions the miraculous nature of her birth. He places her in his slug club but never asks, where did her magic come from? Why her and not her sister, Petunia? It would seem natural, even urgent, to study this phenomenon. Yet the wizarding world behaves as though these miraculous births are no more surprising than a batch of self-stirring cauldrons. The term Muggle-born itself is vague and unsatisfying. It acknowledges the non-magical heritage but offers no insight into the cause. Magic, in this sense, becomes an accidental spark, a spontaneous gift that lands at random. But if randomness were truly the mechanism, wouldn't wizards be desperate to understand it? After all, if magic can emerge from nowhere, could it also disappear without warning? If magic is bound to genetics, then where is the magical gene? And if not, is it some ethereal force that chooses its vessels? The books never say, and this silence is deafening. In a world where portraits retain consciousness and ghosts provide historical commentary, one would expect the magical community to have scholars dedicated to magical heredity. But we meet no magical geneticists, no historians of bloodline phenomena. Even the Department of Mysteries, with its eerie rooms and cryptic research, seems more invested in the nature of death than the nature of birth. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry sees the brains floating in glass jars, he doesn't think about knowledge or thought origins in relation to magical inheritance. Instead, the mystery of bloodlines remains untouched, like an inconvenient riddle no one wants to solve. The lack of investigation is particularly strange given the magical community's obsession with blood purity. Pure-blood families fear extinction through the dilution of magic. Yet if magic can be born anew in any generation, what are they truly protecting? The logic collapses if Muggle-borns like Hermione are just as powerful or even more powerful than the average pure-blood, then the whole ideology of blood supremacy falls apart under its own weight. This is not just a societal blind spot, it is a narrative void, and it leaves an uncomfortable gap in the otherwise intricately woven world. Take the case of Colin Creevey. Born to a Muggle milkman, Colin is as wide-eyed as they come, snapping photos of Harry with innocent awe. He dies fighting in the Battle of Hogwarts, a boy who had no reason to be there except for the accident or miracle of his birth. How did Colin come to wield magic? His brother Dennis also turns out to be magical. Two Muggle parents produce two magical sons, and no one bats an eye. In the real world, such anomalies would launch generations of scientific inquiry. In the wizarding world, they're just sorted into houses and taught how to duel. It's not that magic needs to be explained down to the atom, but in a society where magical blood is currency, the refusal to explore its origins in Muggle-borns feels not just lazy but dangerous. Imagine a wizarding world where researchers sought to identify the earliest signs of latent magic in Muggle children. They could reach out, support, protect. Instead, Muggle-borns are detected by the Ministry's trace system or by mysterious letters from Hogwarts. The system is passive, reactive. There is no known effort to seek understanding. This passive approach becomes even more egregious when you consider the prejudice Muggle-borns face. If the magical community better understood why Muggle-borns exist, they might better defend them. They might even dissolve the myths of impurity. Instead, ignorance fuels bigotry. Voldemort rises on a platform of magical supremacy, despite being a half-blood himself. His disdain for Muggle-borns is a contradiction that goes unchallenged. And yet, his own mother, Merop Gaunt, married a Muggle. His magic didn't dilute, it evolved into something terrifying. Again, no one asks the obvious question, how does this make sense? Even Hogwarts, the revered institution of magical learning, offers no curriculum on magical heritage. Students learn about werewolves, hinkypunks and boggarts, but never about the roots of their own power. It is almost as if they are being deliberately kept ignorant. In Half-Blood Prince, when Harry inherits the textbook with Snape's annotations, he gains a deeper understanding of spellcraft. But nowhere is there a textbook that explores where magic originates, how it's passed down, or why it skips entire generations only to resurface unexpectedly. Squibs add another layer of confusion. Take Argus Filch, a bitter man living among magic. He cannot perform. His parents were magical, yet he was not. The reverse of a muggle-born. Why is there no scientific pursuit of squib cases, no efforts to understand what causes this absence of magic? The magical world appears to take it as fate, as something inscrutable, but in doing so they give up the opportunity to truly understand themselves. One cannot ignore the tragedy of Petunia Dursley. In a forgotten letter revealed only in an early draft and later confirmed by ruling, Petunia once begged Dumbledore to let her attend Hogwarts. She felt the sting of rejection, the bitterness of being left behind, while her sister became something extraordinary. What if Petunia's lack of magic wasn't a lack at all, but a suppressed trait? Could early childhood trauma or environment affect magical emergence? Could the magical gene be recessive, latent, reactive to emotion? These are fascinating questions, yet the world offers no tools to ask them. The closest the series comes to examining the origins of magic is the casual explanation in Philosopher's Stone that some people just have it. That line, delivered without thought or depth, is the only anchor we are given. For a world that builds such a rich tapestry of lore, from wand woods to goblin rebellions, the lack of detail on magical inheritance stands out. It isn't just an oversight, it's an absence of curiosity. And it's out of character for a society that otherwise categorizes, measures, and sorts with frightening precision. Rowling created a world so immersive, so emotionally resonant, that these questions often go unnoticed. We follow the action, we grieve the losses, we cheer the triumphs. But in quieter moments, the lack of logic becomes more difficult to ignore. How can a society obsessed with lineage ignore the miracles within its midst? If Muggle-borns are proof that magic transcends blood, then why are they not celebrated as the future of magic? There's irony in the fact that the most celebrated Muggle-born Hermione spends so much of her time studying magical theory, yet never seeks the origin of her own power. She knows every law, every spell, every historical fact. And yet she never asks the most basic question, why me? Why not my mother or father? Why not my neighbor or my sister? Perhaps she feared the answer. Or perhaps, like the rest of her world, she was trained not to ask. In the end, the silence surrounding Muggle-born magic speaks volumes. It tells us that the wizarding world, for all its brilliance, is not immune to selective blindness, that even a world of spells and wonders can be mired in superstition, prejudice, and intellectual laziness. It also tells us that magic, for all its might, remains unexplored, not because it is unknowable, but because no one dares to look too closely. And maybe that's the greatest magic of all, the ability of a world to accept the miraculous without understanding it, to love what it cannot explain, and to fear the very thing that defies its rules. But as readers, we do not have to accept the silence. We can ask, we can wonder. And in that wondering, we might find the beginning of a new kind of magic, one built not on blood, but on truth. Number 22, the mechanics of time, and how they're totally ignored. In the still corridors of Hogwarts, under the flickering torchlight and the whisper of moving portraits, a decision was made that bent time itself. In her third year, Hermione Granger, ever the brilliant student, was entrusted with a time-turner by Professor McGonagall. This small, delicate device, no larger than a necklace pendant, carried within it the power to alter the past. With it, Hermione defied the linear constraints of time, attending multiple classes simultaneously. But the true weight of this magical artifact revealed itself not in academics, but in a moment of desperate courage, when she and Harry used it to save Sirius Black and Buckbeak from unjust fates. That single act, cloaked in moonlight and the cries of a hippogriff, remains one of the most emotionally resonant turns in the entire series. And yet what followed was a deafening silence. The Time Turner, once revealed, introduced a concept that shook the very fabric of the wizarding world, the manipulation of time. When used by two determined students, it proved powerful enough to alter history in a matter of hours. They watched themselves from afar, dodged their past selves, saved lives, and restored justice. And then, as if nothing had happened, the concept was folded back into the shadows of the Department of Mysteries, never to be used again. In a world threatened by the rise of Voldemort, where every life mattered and every decision bore grave consequences, the logical response would be to revisit this tool. But the books remain stubbornly quiet. In Order of the Phoenix, the Department of Mysteries is shown to contain a room dedicated to time, a place filled with shelves of time-turners, all stored carefully by the Ministry of Magic. It's a space that speaks to the potential and peril of such objects. However, during the battle at the Ministry, when Dumbledore's army fights alongside the Order, and later when Sirius Black falls through the veil of death, no thought is given to retrieving a time-turner and undoing the events of that night. The moment Sirius dies, Harry is inconsolable, crying out in agony. One might think, with time travel already proven viable, that someone, anyone, would have suggested using a time-turner. But it doesn't happen. This silence is not merely an omission, it contradicts what the story has previously shown. The time-turner is canonically real, it functions, it saves lives.
"You must not be seen," Dumbledore warned when entrusting them with the mission to save Sirius. "You would do well to remember that people have died in the past for messing around with time." A warning, yes, but not a prohibition. The idea that such an instrument could be discarded after proving successful feels inconsistent. Why does the magical world allow tragedy after tragedy to unfold without ever revisiting a tool it once used so precisely? Even more puzzling is the Ministry's handling of these devices. The very fact that they are stored at all, not destroyed or locked in some irreversible vault, suggests they are still deemed valuable. Yet in the darkest moments of the war against Voldemort, no strategic wizard suggests their deployment. Not when the Death Eaters murder innocents, not when Dumbledore falls from the astronomy tower, not when entire families are wiped out. The time-turner vanishes from the narrative, not because it is no longer possible, but seemingly because it is no longer convenient for the plot. One of the most frustrating examples comes with the death of Albus Dumbledore in Half-Blood Prince. Snape's killing of the headmaster, witnessed by Harry, who is immobilized and powerless to intervene, becomes a turning point in the series. But why didn't Harry or any member of the Order consider revisiting the moment through time? The answer often offered is that Dumbledore would never have allowed it, that his death served a higher purpose. But this rationale falls apart when we recall that Sirius's death, equally impactful, was reversed in theory through time travel had the books chosen to acknowledge that possibility. Dumbledore's grand plans do not excuse the world's collective refusal to act. The same logic could apply to the Battle of the Seven Potters in Deathly Hallows. During the operation, multiple decoys of Harry are used to transport the real one to safety. It's a night that ends in chaos, with Hedwig's death and Mad-Eye Moody's murder. Imagine the implications of a single time-turner in that scenario. The attack could have been reversed, re-strategized, even prevented entirely. Yet once again, no mention is made, not a whisper of a possibility. What makes this even more jarring is that characters continue to take extraordinary risks when safer options, like the time-turner, have previously been shown to exist. Consider the infiltration of Gringotts. Ron, Hermione, and Harry break into one of the most secure locations in the magical world to steal a Horcrux. They use Polyjuice Potion, a dragon, and pure luck. Had they possessed a time-turner, they could have explored the vault's layout in advance, observed the movements of guards, timed their entry with precision. The story would still be dangerous, but strategically smarter. Instead, they go in blind. The same could be said of the events at Malfoy Manor. The trio is captured, tortured, and nearly killed. Dobby dies, saving them. In a world where time can be rewound, the scene, as heartbreaking as it is, feels unnecessary. It's written for emotional impact, and it succeeds, but it relies on the audience forgetting that an escape from time itself was once possible.
One could argue that the time-turners were all destroyed during the skirmish in the Department of Mysteries. Indeed, that's what J.K. Rowling later confirmed. But this explanation raises more questions than it answers. First, the destruction happens entirely off-page. Readers are never told in the original narrative that all time-turners are gone, only that some were damaged. Second, even if the Ministry's stockpile was obliterated, why wouldn't the magical world try to create more? Wizards create Horcruxes, breed dragons, split souls. They tame death in ways that Muggles can't imagine. Are we to believe that the crafting of new time-turners is so impossibly complex that it dies out forever after one battle? And then there's the cursed child. Though not part of the original 7 books, it introduces a new generation, time-turner, one capable of transporting people years into the past. This plot device opens a floodgate of contradictions. Suddenly time travel is back, but instead of acknowledging its implications with gravity, the story turns it into a high-stakes game of magical mischief. Delphi, daughter of Voldemort, uses time to try and resurrect her father's legacy. Albus and Scorpius play with history like it's a puzzle to be solved. The result is a dizzying chain of alternate realities that only confirms how unstable time travel should be. And yet, it's still used. This reappearance only deepens the logical inconsistency. If it's possible to create such a device again, why didn't Dumbledore's army, the Order, or even the Ministry do so during the war? Why wasn't Voldemort himself obsessed with controlling time, as he was with conquering death? The most dangerous wizard in history, who crafted 7 Horcruxes to cheat death, never once sought to manipulate time. It stretches belief. There are also moral questions that are never answered. If time can be changed, who has the right to change it? When Hermione and Harry save Buckbeak and Sirius, they act out of compassion and justice. But what of others? What stops someone from travelling back to eliminate Tom Riddle in his school years? Or more darkly, what stops a Death Eater from preventing Harry's birth? The mechanics of time, once introduced, demand rules, boundaries, and consequences. But the series introduces them only briefly, and never again. Rowling's own caution about time travel in interviews suggests she knew it was a Pandora's box. In an FAQ after the release of Prisoner of Azkaban, she admitted that she removed the time-turners from the story's future because they made plot resolution too easy. But this is an admission not from the narrative, but from the author. Within the text, there is no such closure. The characters never grapple with the loss. The world never responds to the disappearance of one of its most powerful artifacts. This inconsistency matters because Harry Potter is a world built on internal logic. Spells have consequences, potions have limits, magical laws govern behavior. The time-turner breaks that logic. It offers too much power with too little follow-up. The world should have changed, but it didn't. We saw time's veil lifted once, only to be hastily dropped. To use a time-turner was to glimpse the machinery behind fate. It allowed Harry and Hermione to challenge destiny and win. But the fallout of that moment was never addressed. There should have been debates at the Ministry, ethical questions at Hogwarts, research at the Department of Mysteries. Instead, there was silence. A plot thread left dangling in the wind. Readers are not asking for every magical item to be used endlessly, but consistency demands that the world acknowledge what has been shown. The time-turner was not just a magical gadget, it was a narrative turning point, a glimpse into what could be and what might have been. In a saga that teaches the value of choice, of bravery, and of consequence, ignoring the greatest magical consequence of all feels like a betrayal. The time-turner should have been a gift or a curse, a solution or a problem, but above all, it should have mattered more than once. Because once time is touched, nothing can ever be the same again. Number 23, the Horcrux inside Harry and no one notices? In the vast tapestry of the Harry Potter saga, there exists a storyline so crucial, so central to the ultimate confrontation between good and evil, that its inconsistencies echo like whispered curses through the halls of Hogwarts. It is the enigma of the hidden Horcrux, the unspoken truth that Harry himself carried within him, a fragment of Voldemort's soul. This revelation, dropped upon readers and characters alike in the penultimate moments of the series, is as breathtaking as it is baffling. because for 7 long years nobody, neither Dumbledore, Snape, nor any member of the vast magical apparatus of the wizarding world, ever suspected the truth. How could this have gone unnoticed? How did a boy so intimately tied to the darkest wizard of all time evade every magical detection, every test, every curious gaze? The books make it clear that Harry exhibits traits far beyond the ordinary. He speaks Parseltongue, a gift or curse, almost entirely exclusive to the House of Slytherin and the line of Salazar himself. From the very first moment in the zoo, when the glass disappears and the snake hisses its gratitude, it's obvious that something within Harry is not normal. He looked at the snake and it winked at him. This wasn't just magic, it was Voldemort's magic. And yet this incident was written off by the Dursleys as a freak accident, and even Harry himself didn't question it too deeply. But what of the magical world? What of Dumbledore, the one man who allegedly knew everything? As early as his first year, Harry begins to experience intense, intrusive emotions that don't belong to him. When he first sees Professor Quirrell in the leaky cauldron, he's struck with inexplicable hatred. In the Philosopher's Stone, he touches Quirrell and burns him, an act only possible because of the ancient blood magic of his mother's sacrifice. And yet, Quirrell was literally sharing his body with Voldemort. Harry's connection to Voldemort, his ability to feel his presence and affect those close to him, was not only evident, but extraordinary. Still, no one questioned the origin of this bond. By the second book, the signs become even more overt. Harry's conversations with snakes are public knowledge by now, to the extent that he frightens fellow students. He begins hearing voices that no one else can hear. Kill, kill, so hungry, for so long. A chilling whisper that echoes through the corridors of Hogwarts. These aren't hallucinations, they are the literal thoughts of the basilisk, heard through the conduit of Voldemort's essence. And yet no one, not even Dumbledore, the most powerful wizard alive, takes this as cause for concern. Instead, the mystery of the chamber overshadows the far more disturbing mystery of Harry's unnatural perception. Dumbledore himself admits in the 6th book that he began to suspect the truth about Harry being a Horcrux. But what is puzzling is not the fact that he took time to confirm his suspicions. It's that he told no one, did nothing overt, and most damningly let the boy walk unguarded. The same man who engineered an elaborate plan to give Harry the Sword of Gryffindor in secret, who orchestrated the events of his own death for a greater plan, could not find a single magical object, spell, or potion that would confirm the existence of a piece of soul in a living boy. The inconsistency is staggering. Consider the magical devices within reach. The Marauder's map reveals names and movements, even animagi in disguise. The Ministry uses probity probes and magical detectors for concealment charms. Dumbledore's own office is filled with instruments that whir, whistle, and glow in the presence of magic. One of them, the spinning glass instrument Harry sees in the 5th book, emits a shrill scream when touched by dark magic. Yet none of them respond to Harry. How does a soul fragment as foul and cursed as Voldemort's hide so completely from such vigilant magic? Even Severus Snape, master of legilimency and one of the most brilliant minds in magical history, spends years reading Harry's emotions and memories. If anyone could have noticed a second presence in the boy's mind, it was him. Yet Snape never once mentions this. Never questions why Harry is overwhelmed with sudden rages, why his connection to the Dark Lord intensifies. In fact, Snape's lessons in occlumency reveal the connection more vividly when Voldemort's emotions surge through Harry like fire, but the logical conclusion is never reached. He is feeling what the Dark Lord is feeling, Snape says, but that's where it ends. No questions, no alarm. In the Order of the Phoenix, Harry becomes a vessel of Voldemort's emotions to such an extent that he nearly attacks Dumbledore. His dreams are filled with corridors, doors, and prophecies not his own. He sees through the eyes of a snake as it attacks Arthur Weasley. He was the snake. He was inside it, he later tells Sirius. But instead of any magical diagnosis, they give him a mental health treatment plan, occlumency, and move on. No one ever once considers the possibility of possession, of magical contamination, or of dark enchantment. What's most incredible is that even Voldemort himself remains ignorant of this fragment. The man who tore his soul into 7 pieces, the one who feared death so intensely that he anchored himself in objects, fails to realize that he accidentally embedded his soul in the one boy who survived his killing curse. This strains the narrative's logic to breaking point. Voldemort is canonically obsessed with soul magic. He entrusts Horcruxes to in fairy-guarded lakes and unbreakable curses. He goes to great lengths to retrieve them, but he never senses the largest anomaly of all, part of him inside his enemy. The psychological consequences of being a Horcrux are touched upon in the series, but never fully explored. In The Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore explains that making a Horcrux involves supreme evil. The object becomes a container for suffering, for malevolence. When Harry and Hermione carry the locket, it poisons their thoughts. Ron, overwhelmed, nearly murders Harry. Yet Harry himself, carrying a soul fragment for 17 years, seems mostly fine. He's moody, yes, angry at times, but not homicidal, not corrupted. The contrast is hard to reconcile. Magic in the wizarding world can detect lies, transform bodies, read minds, open portals to other dimensions, and even communicate with the dead. But it cannot detect a sliver of soul lodged in a teenage boy. Not a single spell, rune, or talisman ever flares in Harry's presence, and this from a society so terrified of dark magic that mere possession of a dark artifact is grounds for Azkaban. How did this happen? Why did no one ask the obvious question? Even the ghosts, those ethereal remnants of the magical world, seem blind to it. Nearly headless Nick, the Grey Lady, the Bloody Baron, none show the slightest discomfort around Harry. Yet the books describe soul magic as deeply unnatural. Moaning, Myrtle wails about the horror of her death, yet never senses that a soul fragment lingers nearby. The Fat Friar blesses Harry's comings and goings with no sign of spiritual tension. Shouldn't at least one of these spirits react to a person carrying a cursed soul? The magical education system, too, reveals its flaws. Hogwarts, despite being a bastion of magical learning, has no standard curriculum for the detection or handling of Horcruxes. Harry learns about them not from books, professors, or ministry pamphlets, but from Dumbledore's cryptic storytelling and Slughorn's reluctant memory. A Horcrux, something so dangerous it threatens the fate of the world, is absent from formal education. This secrecy serves the plot, yes, but it does not serve the story's logic. By the time Harry discovers the truth that he must die to kill the soul within, it is almost too late. The climax is powerful, poignant, but it arrives too suddenly. "You were the 7th Horcrux, Harry," Dumbledore tells him in the dreamlike King's Cross, and just like that, years of unexplained phenomena fall into place. But this twist, while emotionally resonant, rests on a shaky foundation. It requires every adult in the series to have missed the clues. It requires the magical world to be incompetent or willfully blind. What if someone had noticed earlier? What if, after the incident in the Chamber of Secrets, a healer from St. Mungo's examined Harry and found an echo of another soul? What if a cursed object detector rang when he walked by? What if Snape, in his fury, probed too deeply and saw the truth? The story could have followed a more nuanced path, one in which Harry grapples not just with prophecy, but with his own inner darkness, known and feared. The unexplored implications of this are enormous. Could Harry have been exorcised? Could the soul piece have been removed without his death? What if the room of requirement held more than just objects? What if it held answers? These questions remain unasked, their silence loud. It is in this silence that the mystery becomes less of a plot twist and more of a narrative oversight. For all its brilliance, the saga falters here. The logic bends, then breaks. It relies on the reader's emotional investment to carry the weight of plausibility. And it works because the heart believes even when the mind protests. In the end, the story of the hidden Horcrux is a haunting one. Not because it's terrifying, but because it should have never been hidden at all. Magic, for all its wonder, fails to illuminate the one truth that mattered most, and the boy who lived unknowingly carried the shadow of death in his soul while the world watched and saw nothing. Number 24. Spells that only work when convenient. There is a curious contradiction at the heart of J.K. Rowling's otherwise wondrous universe, a contradiction that many fans have felt but rarely put into words. In a world where magic is governed by centuries of tradition, where spells are taught in schools with names, wand movements, and incantations, there should be a sense of structure, a system that holds firm regardless of the stakes. And yet the deeper you venture into the story of Harry Potter, the more you begin to see the cracks in that illusion. The issue lies not with the creativity of the spells, nor with their poetic Latin roots, but with the storytelling convenience that too often dictates their effectiveness. Spells that should logically work in every instance become mysteriously unreliable. Others that are inherently mild suddenly carry the weight of a magical canon. There is no greater threat to the believability of a fantasy world than rules that break when it suits the plot. Take the classic example of Protego, the shield charm, taught to students to deflect hexes and jinxes. We see it used by Harry, Hermione, and countless other students in the dueling club introduced in Chamber of Secrets. In one scene, Harry uses Protego to defend against Snape's curses, and later we see it blocking spells hurled by Death Eaters. In Order of the Phoenix, it even throws back jinxes with such force that it knocks the caster down. And yet, in the climactic duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort at the Ministry of Magic, Protego is conspicuously absent. Spells explode, statues are brought to life, glass becomes flying daggers, but the most basic defensive spell isn't cast once. If Protego is taught to 5th years, why do the most powerful wizards not use it in a battle for their lives? In The Half-Blood Prince, Draco Malfoy attempts to use Crucio, an unforgivable curse, but his spell is weak because, as Bellatrix later informs Harry, you need to mean it. This suggests that magical power is not solely in the words or the wand, but in the caster's intention. That raises the question, is magic emotional? Is it psychological? Or is it just inconsistent? Because if emotions power magic, then Harry, whose emotional state is always heightened, should be the most dangerous wizard alive. And perhaps that's what Rowling was aiming for when Expelliarmus, a spell designed to knock a wand from an opponent's hand, becomes his signature move and, in one fateful moment, defeats Voldemort. But this is precisely where the magic begins to lose its internal logic. In Deathly Hallows, during the final duel at Hogwarts, Voldemort casts Avada Kedavra, the killing curse, while Harry uses Expelliarmus. And somehow, incredibly, Expelliarmus wins. The green light of death collides with the red flash of disarming, and the stronger spell, whose entire purpose is murder, fails. And Harry, with the unerring skill of the Seeker, caught the wand in his free hand as Voldemort fell backward. The text reads, "It is a thrilling moment, but it is not a logical one. How can the simplest of spells overpower the most deadly curse known to wizard kind? The answer lies not in the mechanics of magic, but in the mechanics of narrative. Voldemort's defeat is not determined by the superiority of spellwork, but by wand lore and plot structure. The Elder Wand refuses to kill its true master, so Voldemort's curse rebounds. But the question remains, why does Expelliarmus have the power to counter Avada Kedavra in the first place? Why not use Protego, or simply dodge? Because Expelliarmus has become a symbol of Harry's identity, and in the world of storytelling, symbols sometimes override logic. The use of spells as narrative devices rather than consistent tools creates a magical world where outcomes are not governed by skill, training, or knowledge, but by plot necessity. Consider Stupefy, the stunning spell. It is used to incapacitate targets in duels, battles, and even by auras. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry and friends use it to fight Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries. Yet when the same spell is used against stronger foes, it suddenly becomes ineffective. Bellatrix Lestrange shrugs off a Stupefy from multiple attackers. Is she magically resistant? Or is she just too important to the plot to be knocked out in that moment? Then there is Petrificus Totalis, the full, Body Bind Curse. Hermione uses it with great success in Sorcerer's Stone, freezing Neville Longbottom in place, but the same spell, when used against actual enemies in later books, rarely yields the same result. Why does it freeze Neville, a pure-blood wizard, completely but barely phases a Death Eater? Do adult wizards gain resistance with age, or is the spell simply as strong as the scene requires? The inconsistency becomes more glaring when examining Accio, the summoning charm. In Goblet of Fire, Harry uses it to call his broom from hundreds of feet away during the Triwizard Tournament. The power and range of the spell are enormous, but when Ron and Hermione are trying to find Horcruxes, Accio Horcrux never seems to work. Why? Because the plot requires a physical hunt, because if Accio Horcrux worked, the story would end by Chapter 3. In a logically constructed magic system, such contradictions would be explained. Perhaps Horcruxes are enchanted against summoning, but the books rarely offer such explanations. Even Alohomora, the unlocking charm, falls victim to this narrative elasticity. Hermione uses it to open doors in the early books, demonstrating her quick learning and cleverness. But as the series progresses, locked doors become more complex, some requiring passwords, others protected by enchantments. Alohomora simply stops working, with no clear reason why. It's as though the spell obeys not magical rules, but narrative tension. More than once, characters are wounded or cursed with spells that seem to vary in severity depending on the context. When Snape slices Draco's chest with Sectum Sempra, the results are horrific. Blood gushes and Harry is horrified, but in later scenes, characters are hit with blasts and curses that knock them across rooms, yet rise moments later with little more than a groan. There is no clear distinction between a lethal curse and a dramatic shove. The most painful inconsistency appears during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. Here, Harry and his friends face off against adult Death Eaters. The kids throw Stupefy, Expelliarmus, and Petrificus Totalis. The Death Eaters, we assume, use far darker magic, and yet the battle feels strangely safe until Sirius dies. Most spells are flashes of light. There is chaos, yes, but little consequence. If this were a real duel between trained killers and schoolchildren, the results would be devastating, but the magic is conveniently tame until it isn't. Another scene where spell inconsistency undermines drama is in Half-Blood Prince, when Dumbledore dies. Earlier, we've seen him repel a lake full of inferi with fire, conjure glowing ropes to bind enemies, and vanish with a flick of his wand. He is the most powerful wizard alive, and yet, when confronted on the astronomy tower, he raises no defenses, he casts no spell, he freezes Harry, but does nothing else, because the plot requires him to die, not because his magic fails, but because the scene demands it. The idea that magic obeys emotion rather than structure is an interesting concept, but it is not consistently applied. Bellatrix tells Harry, "You have to mean it," when casting Crucio. But does one also have to mean Stupefy or Protego? Is the power of a spell dictated by willpower, knowledge, or sheer narrative importance? The answer is whichever is most useful at the time. Consider Expelliarmus again. In Chamber of Secrets, it is a basic spell used by Snape to disarm Lockhart. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Lupin uses it casually, but by Deathly Hallows, it is Harry's signature move. Voldemort mocks it. He does not seek to kill you, Dumbledore's boy. He casts Expelliarmus. And yet, it is this very spell that topples the Dark Lord. It's a poetic end, but in terms of magical logic, it's absurd. Wandless magic adds another layer of inconsistency. Dumbledore and Voldemort both demonstrate the ability to perform magic without speaking or even using wands. In Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore conjures shields, animates statues, and redirects curses with casual grace. But then, in less dramatic scenes, even he reverts to spoken incantations. Why? Because wandless magic is impressive, so it is reserved for climaxes. The rest of the time, spells must be spoken for clarity and structure. Magic, like any system, should have rules. It can be complex, even mysterious, but it must be consistent. Otherwise, it becomes a tool of convenience, not a part of the world's logic. When a spell like Lumos works every time and Expelliarmus sometimes defeats death itself, readers are left confused, not because they lack imagination, but because they crave order within chaos. It's not just fans who notice this. Rowling herself once stated that she never wanted to pin down the mechanics of magic too tightly. That choice gave her creative freedom, but it also meant sacrificing structural integrity. Magic became metaphor, not science. And metaphors are slippery things. The strength of Harry Potter lies in its emotional truth, its characters, and its mythic arcs. But the magic, the literal magic, is too often a narrative shortcut. And while we cheer as Harry wins against impossible odds, part of us wonders, did he win through skill, through heart, or because the script demanded it? In the end, we are left with a magical system that dazzles the eye but stumbles under scrutiny. Spells glow, spark, and sizzle, but their impact shifts like the wind. They serve the story, not the world. And while that makes for dramatic moments, it leaves behind the uneasy sense that in the wizarding world, magic is not a discipline, it's a suggestion. Number 25. Wizarding laws that don't apply to the chosen ones. From the moment Harry enters the wizarding world, readers are told one thing: the laws of magic are strict, and the consequences for breaking them are severe. The Ministry of Magic looms large as a bureaucratic and often terrifying authority, watching over witches and wizards with a stern gaze. Underage magic is prohibited. Tampering with Muggle artifacts is illegal. Time travel is restricted to life and death matters only. These aren't mere guidelines, they're mandates backed by the threat of Azkaban. But as the story unfolds, a curious pattern emerges. These laws often bend, sometimes snap when it comes to the central characters. Not everyone is treated equally. In the world of magic, justice is alarmingly selective. Take Arthur Weasley, for example, a charming, good-hearted man with an insatiable curiosity for Muggle inventions. Yet his day job is in the misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, where he is literally responsible for ensuring that magical folk don't enchant everyday objects in ways that could endanger Muggles. And what does Arthur do in his spare time? He enchants a flying car. "It's got an invisibility booster I installed myself," he says proudly. Not only is this a breach of magical law, but it's a direct risk to the statute of secrecy. And what happens when the car is seen by several Muggles flying over London and crashes into the Whomping Willow? Nothing. Arthur is given a mild scolding by his superiors. The event is brushed aside. No fines, no inquiries, no public backlash. The law, clearly stated in the Standard Book of Spells and Ministry Guidelines, simply doesn't stick. Then there's Fred and George Weasley, the beloved pranksters. Their antics at Hogwarts are often framed as endearing, a welcome rebellion against authority. But in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, they cross a line. The twins release a swamp that overtakes an entire corridor. They detonate enchanted fireworks, some of which require Professor Flitwick's expertise to neutralize. They outright refuse to follow school regulations under the High Inquisitor Dolores Umbridge, and their exit is nothing short of an orchestrated riot. "Give her hell from us, Peeves," they shout as they vanish into the skies, heroes of anarchy. But let's be clear, they endangered students, destroyed school property, and encouraged open defiance of institutional authority. In any other context, especially with any other characters, such actions would merit expulsion or even criminal charges. Instead, they are lionized. Contrast this with Stan Shunpike, the hapless conductor of the night bus. In Half-Blood Prince, Stan is arrested for allegedly sympathizing with Death Eaters. There is no concrete evidence. Scrimgeour admits he's young and he's stupid, but he's not dark. Yet Stan is thrown into Azkaban. A teenager who boasts in a pub is punished more harshly than twin brothers who unleash chaos in a school full of children. The difference? Stan isn't part of the inner circle. He's not one of them. Perhaps the most glaring example of legal selectivity is Hermione Granger's use of the time turner. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Professor McGonagall pulls Hermione aside and provides her with one of the most tightly controlled magical devices in existence. "Miserable old bat," Ron mutters. But Hermione is handed a magical object with the power to rewrite history. The time turner is so dangerous that the Department of Mysteries keeps them under strict lock and key, and yet a third-year student is granted permission to use it daily for the purpose of attending extra classes. When the opportunity arises to use the device to save both Buckbeak and Sirius Black, Hermione and Harry do so, risking countless timelines. The result? She's praised. Dumbledore sends them off with a cryptic wink. 3 turns should do it. There is no investigation, no questioning, no accountability. Now consider a different magical misstep, the accidental inflation of Aunt Marge. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry, emotional and traumatized, loses control of his magic and causes his aunt to balloon and float into the night. The Ministry's response is not leniency, it is immediate panic. They send an emergency team to deflate her and nearly expel Harry. Only when Cornelius Fudge personally steps in, aware of Sirius Black's escape, does the punishment vanish. But what if Harry had been a nobody? Would the Ministry have been so forgiving? Harry's fame shields him. Fudge even says, accidents happen, the best wizards lose control of their magic sometimes. This sudden wave of tolerance doesn't come from fairness, it's tactical. Harry is needed, therefore he is spared. Regulation of underage magic is another glaring hypocrisy. Harry is chastised in Order of the Phoenix for casting the Patronus charm to save himself and his cousin from Dementors. A full hearing is held at the Ministry. Dumbledore must intervene to prevent Harry's expulsion. Yet throughout the series, characters like Ron, Fred, and George regularly perform minor spells outside of school with little to no consequence. Ginny uses the Bat-Bogey Hex. The twins experiment with skiving snack boxes. The law is not consistently enforced. It's a convenience when the Ministry wants to make a point or assert dominance. This selective application of magical law extends into the adult world. Take the case of Sirius Black. He is imprisoned in Azkaban without trial. As Dumbledore later confirms, he was not given a trial. The wizarding justice system is swift and merciless, except when it's not. In contrast, Barty Crouch Jr. is caught using the Cruciatus curse and sent to Azkaban, yet is later broken out and hidden by his own father, a high-ranking Ministry official. There is no inquiry into this cover-up until it is far too late. The Ministry of Magic's blind spots are not mere oversights, they are systemic. In Goblet of Fire, the rules of the Triwizard Tournament are absolute. Once your name comes out of the goblet, you are bound to compete. Yet this supposedly unbreakable magical contract is twisted to force Harry into a competition he never entered. No one questions the legitimacy of a 14-year-old being forced to fight dragons and mermaids. Why? Because the law, like everything else, bends to serve narrative convenience. Ludo Bagman, who gambles and cheats during the tournament, faces no repercussions. But Winky, the house elf, who merely holds a wand during the Quidditch World Cup, is fired in disgrace. Once again, power determines guilt. The corruption of the legal system is perhaps best illustrated in Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore attempts to shield Harry from Ministry punishment. The hearing is moved up without notice. Harry is tried in full court, a process usually reserved for serious crimes. Madam Bones says this is out of the ordinary. The Ministry uses the full weight of its bureaucracy to intimidate a teenager because they fear what he represents. Meanwhile, Death Eaters like Lucius Malfoy walk free, buying their way out of justice with donations and influence. As Sirius bitterly notes, the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. Even the rules governing magical creatures are enforced selectively. Buckbeak is sentenced to death for scratching Draco Malfoy, despite Hagrid's pleas and eyewitness testimony that Draco provoked the animal. The Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures acts swiftly and without compassion, but Fenrir Greyback, a werewolf known for targeting children, is never actively hunted by the Ministry. His crimes are known, his victims are many, yet he thrives under Voldemort and is ignored by the government until it's too late. Dumbledore himself is not above bending the law. He routinely withholds information from the Ministry, endangers students in the name of greater good, and manipulates events behind the scenes. His protection of Harry is noble but fraught with moral grey areas. In The Half-Blood Prince, he allows Harry to use an illegal potion to retrieve a memory from Slughorn. He offers no apology for manipulating events because he believes in the end result. Justice, in the hands of the powerful, becomes a tool, not a principle. The deepest irony lies in the treatment of Tom Riddle. Despite warning signs, his fascination with forbidden magic, his manipulation of others, his theft of items from the castle, he is allowed to remain at Hogwarts. Dumbledore watches but does not act. The system that punishes Stan Shunpike for idle boasting turns a blind eye to the early signs of a Dark Lord. When evil is convenient, it is ignored. When innocence is inconvenient, it is condemned. Even the rules of death are arbitrary. In the Deathly Hallows, Harry survives the killing curse, not once but twice. The logic is explained vaguely by love and sacrifice. But this metaphysical justification is never held up against the rules of magic previously established. The Elder Wand obeys Harry despite never being in his possession. The Resurrection Stone, the Invisibility Cloak, the Hallows themselves, objects of immense power, are wielded with impunity by a select few. The laws of magic don't apply to them, they are chosen. The question that emerges from all these examples is not simply about fairness. It's about the function of law in the wizarding world. If laws exist but are not enforced equally, they become instruments of control rather than justice. Those within the circle, Harry, Hermione, Dumbledore, the Weasleys, are protected. Those outside it are vulnerable. The wizarding world is not a meritocracy. It is a system of favoritism, where power shields guilt and obscurity invites punishment. This is not democracy. This is magical privilege. The rules apply until they don't. Justice is real until it becomes inconvenient, and those who dare to question the system from Sirius to Dobby are discarded, silenced, or enslaved. The lesson beneath the magic is a sobering one. In a world where wands can change reality, the truth remains as fragile as ever. Number 26. The school's total failure in mental health. The great halls sparkled with floating candles and enchanted ceiling skies, but beneath the flickering charm, Hogwarts carried a secret that no spell could hide. For all its moving staircases and talking portraits, the school was spectacularly unequipped in the one area where it mattered most: the human mind. In a world where portraits could recall lifetimes and ghosts wandered the halls, it was nothing short of astonishing that not a single adult thought to check on the hearts of the children. From the moment Harry Potter first set foot in Hogwarts, danger clung to him like a second skin. A troll in the dungeon, a cursed broomstick, a basilisk under the castle. And yet never once did a trained adult stop to ask if he was coping. "You're a wizard, Harry," Hagrid said, and from that day forward, the world expected Potter to shoulder burdens that would break most men. He was 11. There were no follow-up questions. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Harry was forced into a deadly tournament against his will. After witnessing the brutal murder of Cedric Diggory and the return of Voldemort, his trauma was raw, bleeding, and undeniable. And yet, the school's response. Dumbledore gave a brief speech in the Great Hall. "Remember, Cedric, remember, if the time should come when you have to make a choice between what is right and what is easy." A noble sentiment, perhaps, but the boy who saw the killing curse up close? He was simply sent back to the Dursleys. There were no grief counsellors, no debriefing, no one to sit with him and ask, "Are you afraid to sleep now?" The lack of psychological care was not an oversight. It was institutional. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry suffered intense PTSD. He had visions, mood swings, and overwhelming guilt over Sirius Black. He isolated himself, lashed out, and feared he was losing his mind. His only solace came in the form of occlumency lessons from Professor Snape, who actively increased his emotional suffering. Rather than offer compassion, Snape dug into Harry's worst memories, mocking his vulnerabilities. Weakness, in this world, was to be buried, not healed. Consider Neville Longbottom, whose parents were tortured into insanity. Raised by a stern grandmother, mocked by peers, Neville wandered the castle with a heart full of quiet ache. His Boggart took the form of Snape. His trauma ran deeper than most ever saw. Did anyone ever ask if he missed his mother's voice? Did anyone offer him support when he visited his parents in St. Mungo's, only to be met with blank stares? "They don't recognize me," he told Harry with a broken softness. And still, no one in Hogwarts thought to help this boy process the cruel hand he'd been dealt. Luna Lovegood, dreamy and strange, spoke often of things others could not see. Her mother died in a magical accident. She was bullied relentlessly. Her belongings were stolen. She coped through eccentricities, through belief in imaginary creatures. Was this whimsical, or was it a child's shield against grief? Things we lose have a way of coming back to us in the end, if not always in the way we expect. Luna said this with hope, but also with pain. Hogwarts admired her uniqueness, but it never protected her emotional core. Even Draco Malfoy, the so-called antagonist, bore the psychological bruises of a child raised in fear. In Half-Blood Prince, he was tasked with a murder by Voldemort himself. He became pale, haunted, and withdrawn. He spent days alone in the room of requirement. He cried in the bathroom. He couldn't do it. "I have to do this, he'll kill me," Draco whispered, trembling under the weight of expectation. And yet no professor asked why this child, just 16, was unraveling. He wasn't dangerous, he was desperate. And what of Ginny Weasley, who was possessed by Tom Riddle's diary at just 11? Her mind was infiltrated, her body used. She nearly died. When the Chamber of Secrets was closed, no one offered her therapy or a safe space to process the horror. She returned to class as if nothing had happened. The narrative moved on, and so did everyone else. But Ginny had written messages in blood. She had lain unconscious beside a basilisk. Who guided her back to wholeness? Sirius Black's death in the Department of Mysteries broke Harry in a new way. "It's all my fault," he said. "But guilt this heavy does not dissolve with sleep." At Grimmauld Place, Sirius showed glimpses of his own trauma, wrongful imprisonment, betrayal, lost time. His instability was visible, and Harry loved him anyway. When Sirius died, Harry lost his last parental figure. But there was no grief leave, no counsellor, just more Dursleys, more silence, more of that bitter phrase, "He'll be fine." The adults at Hogwarts often spoke of bravery, resilience, and sacrifice. But they never taught what it meant to grieve. They never discussed how to ask for help or how to recognize when your mind is not your own. They had ghostly teachers, talking hats, and enchanted textbooks, but not a single therapist. The mirror of Erased, which revealed a person's deepest desire, was locked away not because it was dangerous, but because it was too revealing. Emotional honesty in this world was feared more than fire-breathing dragons. The most egregious example came in Deathly Hallows. After Harry returned from the Forbidden Forest, having willingly met death, he was not examined, healed, or even spoken to with care. He was left to walk back to the castle alone, like a soldier returning from war. He had just faced Voldemort. He had seen the dead, his parents, Sirius, Remus. He had chosen sacrifice, and yet no one pulled him aside to ask, "What did you see there?" Not even Dumbledore's portrait. In the aftermath, when Hogwarts lay in ruins and Fred Weasley's body lay among the fallen, there was no mourning ceremony, no communal cry, no mental health support. Students, many of them minors, had just fought in a war. Children killed Death Eaters. Children watched friends die, Lavender Brown mauled by Fenrir Greyback, Colin Creevey dead on the battlefield. The trauma was colossal, and the response? Breakfast in the Great Hall the next morning, with house banners restored. Tom Riddle himself was a case study in the consequences of emotional neglect. Raised in an orphanage, gifted but unloved, he became obsessed with power. Dumbledore met him as a boy and sensed the danger. Yet even then he offered education, not empathy. Riddle grew into Voldemort under the tutelage of a system that prized talent over tenderness. His heart hollowed long before his soul ever split. "There is no good and evil," he would later say. "There is only power." But power was all he was ever taught. The irony is brutal. The magical world cured broken bones in seconds, but could not mend broken spirits. Madame Pomfrey could regrow shattered limbs, but not a single soul thought to heal the invisible wounds. The room of requirement could transform into anything, except a safe space for trauma recovery. The pensive could externalize memories, yet no professor used it to help students unpack their pain. Even the Ministry of Magic, with all its departments and bureaucracy, lacked any division for psychological health. When St. Mungo's was shown, it housed the physically cursed, the permanently hexed. But where were the healers of hearts? Where was the ward for night terrors, for survivors of Imperius, for those who had watched family die under green light? It wasn't just Harry, it was everyone. The Battle of Hogwarts left behind an entire generation of traumatized youth, and the wizarding world offered them no tools to heal, no art therapy, no trauma-informed teachers, no magical equivalent of a grief journal or support circle. They were expected to recover because they were magical, as if magic could ever replace mourning. Hogwarts, for all its grandeur, operated on a belief that pain was character-building, that suffering was noble. But pain, left unchecked, festers, it scars, it corrupts, and the consequences ripple. In a world where memory could be bottled, where time could be turned, where love could ward off death, how did no one ever think to simply ask, "How are you feeling today?" The ultimate tragedy is that the children of this world were taught to fight, but never taught to feel. They were trained in defense against the dark arts, but never in defense against despair. They learned how to duel, but not how to talk about nightmares. They mastered Patronuses, but never understood the depression that Dementors symbolized. They knew how to vanish objects, but could not vanquish grief. And so Hogwarts became a battlefield long before the war began. It wasn't just Voldemort who hurt them. It was the silence, the stoicism, the magical belief that trauma would simply dissolve like potion fumes into air. But the truth lingered, like a whisper in the corridors. Magic healed wounds, but the mind? The mind was left to suffer in silence. Number 27, why does the Ministry even have departments if one person decides everything? In the shadowy halls of the Ministry of Magic, 1,000 desks hum with the scratch of quills, memos flutter like enchanted paper birds through the air, and fireplaces blaze emerald green with the flames of endless communication. It is a place of purpose, of order, at least on the surface. Departments are divided with bureaucratic precision. The Department of Magical Games and Sports oversees Quidditch affairs. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures manages centaur relations and dragon incidents, and the Department of Magical Law Enforcement governs the magical justice system. The structure is intricate, almost majestic, but the deeper one looks, the more the edifice begins to crack, revealing a system that is not a democracy, not even a well-run bureaucracy, but a one-man show in elegant robes. The central question arises with increasing urgency as we examine the events across the 7 books. Why do all these departments exist if, in the end, everything hinges on the whims of a single person, the Minister of Magic? Cornelius Fudge, the first minister most readers encounter, serves as a case study in unchecked magical authority. When the Chamber of Secrets is opened in Harry's second year, Fudge arrives at Hogwarts not with reason, but with pre-made decisions. Without trial or investigation, he sends Rubeus Hagrid to Azkaban. "The governors have been in touch," he says vaguely, but it is he who acts. Dumbledore is removed from his post not by consensus or court, but by a theatrical decree, as if Hogwarts were a pawn in his political game. One would expect, in a world where lives are on the line, that such actions would require evidence, hearings, procedures. None come. As the narrative progresses, the pattern only deepens. The appointment of Dolores Umbridge as Hogwarts High Inquisitor is another testament to the Ministry's alarming authority. Her powers are sweeping. She can inspect, humiliate, suspend teachers without resistance. She rewrites Hogwarts' educational rules through decrees that seem to bypass any form of academic governance. Educational Decree number 23 reads, The Ministry of Magic has the right to appoint a candidate for the post of head of Hogwarts if the headmaster is unable to provide a suitable candidate. But who defines suitability? Again, the answer is the minister. It is a contradiction that feels increasingly bizarre. We are told the ministry is layered with departments, officials, rules, but none of these mechanisms seem capable of restraining its head. When Fudge decides Harry is lying about Voldemort's return, a media campaign is launched. The Daily Prophet becomes a propaganda machine. Any pretense of press freedom vanishes as easily as a vanishing cabinet. The ministry's hand is felt in every article, every whisper of scandal. There is no independent press council, no ombudsman, no visible mechanism to separate power from truth. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement, headed by Amelia Bones, is ostensibly the most powerful legal entity in the wizarding world. Yet when Harry is tried for underage magic in Order of the Phoenix, the Wizengamot, Magical Britain's version of a high court, acts more like a panel of political appointees than an impartial judiciary. They change the location and time of the trial to sabotage Dumbledore's ability to testify. They do not permit witnesses Harry had brought. Dumbledore, in response, coldly reminds them, laws can be changed if the Wizengamot sees fit. Indeed, they can. And they often are. There is no House of Representatives, no elected legislative body. The Wizengamot is old, secretive, and easily manipulated. Take Pius Thicknessy, for example, a man who becomes minister under the Imperious Curse during the final book. Once again, the problem is not just evil, it is structure. There is no mechanism that notices the head of government is behaving out of character. No checks, no council, no vote of no confidence, no ministry, staff refusing orders. Even the Department of Magical Law Enforcement becomes a tool of darkness overnight, as if the entire bureaucracy is made of paper and the minister is holding the only wand capable of lighting a match. Even Kingsley Shacklebolt, considered one of the more morally sound ministers, inherits this broken apparatus without changing it. By the time he assumes office after Voldemort's fall, the public is desperate for stability. Kingsley brings reforms, certainly, but again we are not shown any parliamentary procedures. We are told Kingsley cleaned house, that he removed corrupt officials and restructured the Auror office. These are decisive actions, but again, unilateral. He acts as a benevolent monarch, not a prime minister answerable to any council. The structure that allowed Fudge and Thickness to rule with absolute discretion remains intact. Where are the elected officials? In Muggle Britain, there is Parliament. In the United States, there is Congress. These bodies may be flawed, but they are visible. They debate, they argue, they resist. In the wizarding world, however, decision-making appears theatrical, carried out in grand courtrooms or through official decrees posted on bulletin boards. The public plays no role. Even when major crises occur, like the return of Voldemort, no public addresses are made. The minister does not stand before a magical nation. He whispers through newspapers. There is no State of the Wizarding Union. The departments themselves, despite their colourful names and clear jurisdictions, operate more like decorative furniture than functional organs. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, for instance, is repeatedly shown to be inefficient or even harmful. Remus Lupin, a competent teacher and werewolf, is forced out of his job due to public prejudice, not policy. When Hermione campaigns for the rights of house elves, the department shows no interest. Centaurs and goblins are treated as nuisances, and during the rise of Voldemort, the department does nothing to protect the magical creatures being hunted or manipulated. Then there is the Department of Mysteries, a name so grand it promises depth but delivers little. Its role remains elusive, but what we do learn is chilling. It houses the brain room, the hall of prophecies, and the veil of death. This department is filled with unspeakables, people so bound by secrecy they may as well be ghosts. The idea is tantalizing, but the reality is disturbing. Why does such a powerful department have no transparency, no oversight? When Sirius Black dies during the battle there, no inquiry follows, no investigation. A man dies in the heart of the ministry, and the event vanishes like smoke. We must ask, is the ministry's structure merely theatrical, designed to mimic order while hiding a dictatorship. Every example points towards centralization of power. Even personnel decisions, such as the appointments of auras or the leadership of departments, are made without visible process. There is no magical equivalent of a civil service examination, no transparent promotion system. Dolores Umbridge is promoted not because of competence, but because of loyalty to the minister. Rufus Scrimgeour, Fudge's successor, replaces dissenting voices with ministry loyalists. It is an autocracy with a ministry costume. Rufus Scrimgeour himself continues the pattern. When he visits Harry to ask for his cooperation, he expects submission, not negotiation. "It's time you learned some respect," he barks, expecting compliance simply because he holds the title of minister. There is no room for dissent in his worldview. He represents not the magical community, but the ministry as a symbol of order and control. Even in times of war, he prefers propaganda over truth, control over chaos. The people's will, once again, is irrelevant. And then we have the question of magical law. Laws exist, certainly, underage magic, use of unforgivable curses, animagus registration. But these laws are enforced inconsistently, often manipulated to fit political needs. The trace on underage magic is conveniently vague. It catches Harry for a Patronus, but not the Dursleys' destruction. The rule of secrecy is bent to allow obliviation of muggles, but not to protect their rights. In Book 5, Dumbledore warns Harry, the Ministry prefers not to use the term truth. Indeed, it seems allergic to it. This raises a troubling issue. Is the Ministry even interested in justice or merely control? The presence of Dementors in Azkaban, creatures that feed on human despair, is telling. Justice in the wizarding world is not rehabilitative, but punitive to a Gothic extreme. Azkaban exists not just to hold criminals, but to break them. When Hagrid is imprisoned without trial, the only concern shown is by Dumbledore. No defense attorney arrives, no appeal process is offered. The idea of a magical rights charter is absent. It is also worth asking what happens to dissenters. We see what happens to Dumbledore, removed and discredited. We see what happens to Sirius, imprisoned without trial. We see what happens to Stan Shunpike, arrested just for being a little too talkative. The Ministry arrests, exiles and slanders, all in the name of stability. When power is challenged, it does not debate, it retaliates. In Book 7, the Ministry falls to Voldemort, and the only difference is the honesty of the regime. No longer pretending to be just, the Ministry becomes openly tyrannical. Muggleborns are hunted, blood status becomes policy, and torture replaces trials. But the structure? It barely changes. The problem, it turns out, was never just the minister. It was the system that allowed him to reign unchallenged. There is something tragic about this design. A world so full of wonder, so rich in magic and possibility, reduced to a government as fragile as parchment in a storm. Witches and wizards can defy death, travel through time, and transform into animals, but they cannot elect their leaders, demand a trial, or hold power accountable. Perhaps in the end, the Ministry of Magic is not a government at all. It is a stage, and the minister is merely the actor with the loudest voice.